I am going to call to order the town council meeting on May 12th, 2020 at 7 p.m. If we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America
and to the
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're not on video.
Okay, thank you. So, and I am going to call to order the town council meeting on May 12th, 2020 at 7 p.m. I think we need to mute everybody, right, Mike? Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, there's one particular person. Let me see.
Pledge allegiance.
I think we should be
To the flag
of the United
States of America
and to the
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
I think we're okay now.
indivisible,
We're okay now?
with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
You're not on video.
We have no proclamations or presentations today. Thank you. We'll have our first area of public petitions, communications, and public participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council with a 2-minute limit. If you would like to speak, you have called in with, if you're on the computer, when you go
There's one
to
particular
the
person.
participants
Let me see.
box, you can raise your hand to speak. We'll call on people in the order in which their hands are raised. And if you are on a phone call, you need to hit *9 and that will raise your hand. And when you do speak, you need to state your name and address prior to. If anybody would like to say anything, communications and public participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council.
Yep, Colleen
With a
just raised her
2-minute
hand.
limit. If you would like to speak, okay, called in with Colleen. If you're on the computer,
Hey guys,
when you go
Colleen
There's
Yudichak,
one
12
to
Blueberry
the
Hill.
participants
I said a
box, you
couple
can raise
things,
your hand to speak.
Some of probably will
We'll
be
call
I
on people
assume
in the
during
order
the
in which their
COVID
hands are
update.
raised. And if you
I
are
know
on
today
a
the
phone
number's
call, you need to
39.
hit
I'm just wondering if that
*9,
number
and
is
that will
actually
raise your hand.
now hopefully
And
lower,
when
since
you
I
do
think that
speak,
number's been
you
you
need
know
to state your name
up
and
there
address
for a little
prior
bit.
to.
Not sure if that makes sense. I'm
If
assuming
anybody
some of those
would
people,
like
I'm
to
hoping,
say anything,
are better,
and public
or if that
participation
39
on
are
any
actually
subject
still
within the jurisdiction of
infected
the town council.
residents. And then I was just wondering, any update will be discussed tonight about the referendum, how that may look pretty soon. And lastly, I just look forward to a good conversation tonight regarding the budget. That's it.
Thank you, Colleen.
Jamie?
Your name
Up
and
there
address
for a little
prior
bit.
to. Anybody else
I'm
want
assuming
to
some of those
say anything
people
before we get into the meat of it?
are better, or if that 39 are actually still
I am
infected
not
residents.
seeing anything.
And then I was just
Colleen, your hand's up
wondering,
again.
any
Is it to
update-
say something?
any update
or?
will be discussed tonight about the referendum, how that may look pretty soon.
Okay, I'm assuming that.
Lastly, I just look forward to a
it's
good
not.
conversation tonight regarding the budget.
Okay. Public hearing items. Tonight, we have none. Reports and boards of boards and committees responsible to the council. Say anything before we
I
get into the meat of it?
Or if that 39 are actually
Katie
still
is on?
infected,
I am not.
residents.
Yes,
Anything?
Katie Murray. I'm chair of the
and then I was
building,
just
the
Colleen, your
virtual
hand's up
building
again.
committee.
Is it to say
Um,
something?
I just
or-
wanted to bring up the status of where things are right now with the building
Okay, I'm
committee.
assuming that
I just look forward to a
it's
good
not.
conversation tonight regarding the budget.
We have a meeting scheduled
Public
for a
hearing
week from
items.
tonight.
Tonight, we have
And
none.
this is sort of the long-awaited
Reports and
meeting
boards
where
of
we're going
boards
to
and
see the
committees
total
responsible to
project
the
budget.
council. Say anything
There are
before we
two
get into the meat of it?
indicators right now that
Is on?
um,
I am not.
probably indicate that we're going to be over budget, as we have been looking at steel, which came out several weeks ago. Steel's running over. It costs more to do steel, I guess. I understand that has to do with the accelerated timeframe. The steel came in about $500,000 over the anticipated budget, and we were notified last week that the unsuitable soil on site has exceeded the allowance, and there's still more unsuitable soil on site. And we don't know yet the extent of unsuitable soil, how much that's going to cost us. We should get more information next week on that. Although I have been told that there's another 3 to 5 weeks, depending on grounds work on the site. So we have asked for a full accounting of all unsuitable soil costs to date for next week, and an estimate on any future unsuitable soil costs. So we shall see a full budget next week. The project went out to bid for a number of different trades. I spoke with the contractor today. He had just finished his last scope review, so he is in the process of putting together what they call the very fancy gross maximum price, or GMP, which we will get next Tuesday. And right now the project is on schedule, and steel is scheduled to come on site for June 1st. Apparently the steel bid, the winning steel bid, the lowest cost came out of Schenectady, New York. And I hear we were lucky because they were also doing a state project out of New York. So throughout COVID closures, they remained open. So the steel is on time, which is a great thing for us. And we'll be on site for June 1st. We are told that despite the unexpected unsuitable soils, that the site work is still on track. And we expect the site work, the footings and other concrete work that's happening in the ground should be completed in time for steel. And the project continues to progress on for them to turn over the keys for August 23rd, 2021.
Okay, so you'll be getting the GMP, I'm sorry, this week, you said? Or next week?
No, next week.
Next week.
Next Tuesday night on the 19th of May is our regularly scheduled building committee meeting. We do have a representative from the state of Connecticut who's going to be there. I believe Costa said he would be there. He's kind of the head guy, and he's going to be in attendance to our meeting to co-present GMP along with the contractor.
Okay, and at that time, if the budget is still projected to be over, will they be talking about remediations, or like, I'm assuming that you guys are going to look at all of that together? And
yeah, we've been working on the biggest effort that's happened over the last 6 to 8 weeks outside of the project site has been on what they call value engineering. To date, I believe we value engineered at least $3 million worth of costs off of the project. That's the estimated value for the things that have been altered or removed. And I had a call today with the architect, and he said he had an idea for some additional value engineering. So that hasn't stopped. At some point, we're going to be told that we value engineered as much as we can, but I don't believe we're there yet.
Looks like Brenda, you have your hand up.
I just want you to be aware I'm getting a lot of text messages from people who are unable to join the meeting because the password is not working. And Katie, I want to thank you for your work. I noticed we do have a few people who are involved in the project who are on this call too, and I want to thank them for their time and their attention.
Okay. as far as the password thing, Brenda, if they're texting you, I would suggest to them that they click on it from the actual agenda, and that will bring them through the internet, and that will bring them directly into the room, because there is a problem somehow for entering the password if they try to do it through the regular Zoom application.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to them.
Okay, Lou, your hand is up.
Wrong button, sorry. Yeah, Katie, just, I know that we'll be discussing this more with the Birch Grove meeting next week, but is there any indication from Costa or anybody else from the state as far as, I mean, that's a lot of money that we're over budget. And is there any possibility that they will, that they've said that they will cover that, since the remediation of the soil and the steel were sort of unforeseeable issues that we encountered?
Last time I was on a call with Costa, he indicated that he would be willing to come to the table with the full reimbursement rate for the unexpected extra costs. He was concerned about the unsuitable soil and the state's or the town's responsibility, I guess, on unsuitable soils. Obviously, this was something that was unexpected, and he wondered if anyone in town knew anything about it. I can tell you that through my work with the town staff, there is no records that anyone has been able to find about the unsuitable soil. But my expectation is that Costa will probably come to the table willing to cover costs at the full reimbursement rate, which, as we know, is 89%.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, I know that us with the going through the entire remediation budget, and we've only gotten 1/3 done. We're still looking at a lot of money, but that's something that we can discuss next week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody
And
else?
Lou, I think, oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Lou, I think
I'm
it would
finished
be
now.
really helpful to have Costa there next week, so that questions like that can be asked directly of him. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions where I know the answers, but quite frankly, I'm not Costa. And I think for that reason, I've requested that Costa be in attendance next week, and it looks like we're going to get him. So that's good news.
That's really good. Hopefully it's a good dialogue back and forth. So they can try to understand, like you said, and like Lou said, these are unanticipated. It's not like we magically knew it was going to be there. So hopefully they'll be a little forgiving on that. I see Brenda, you have your hand back up. You're muted, Brenda.
I know, there we go, there we go. I just want to make sure I understood the reimbursement. We had 89% reimbursement of the school building itself, which was, what was it? 89% of 46 million, so that's what, $40 million. And was it 100% of the modulars at 9 million? Was that what we were reimbursed for, or they paid for?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve?
Steve Jones, Council. Just a quick question. I think, sorry if I missed it, but did this impact at all the current timeline?
No, right now they're running on schedule.
Okay, yeah.
Lou?
Yeah, Katie, just clarification on the question. We're being reimbursed 100% up to this point, but if it goes a day over, then the state said that they wouldn't reimburse. Is that correct?
So the 100% reimbursement was for the modulars. last year, towards the end of the year, the town broke this into 2 projects. And the modulars were reimbursed at 100%. The rebuild of Birch Grove is at 89%. I haven't heard any discussion about reimbursement rates if we go late or if we go over, if the schedule gets extended. I will tell you, it is the first question that everybody asks. So certainly people are paying a lot of attention to the schedule, but I haven't heard any discussion about a change in reimbursement if the project runs long.
Hopefully it won't run long, but maybe we
That's
should
right.
ask that question.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Does anybody have any other questions for Katie? Katie, I'll definitely be sure to join that May 19th meeting and listen in. If there's any materials, though, I don't usually get agendas for you guys. Do you guys have agendas with like backup and stuff?
The agenda will go out, or should come out of Mike's office in the next day or 2. The documents
Probably
that are
Thursday. Yeah, I would say most likely Thursday.
Okay, thanks, Mike. There isn't a lot of supporting documentation on that. Quite frankly, a lot of it's not going to be ready until the meeting. But let me work with the people at the town office and Mike's office to see if any materials that might be distributed to the building committee members and used as reference for discussion can get posted, so that members of the public and the council, et cetera, could be able to reference them along with the members of the committee at the meeting.
I would appreciate that. Being able to look at the stuff that's there while you guys are talking about it would be definitely would be useful.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, does anybody else have anything for Katie before we let her go? Mike.
Yes, hi, Mike Rosen, town manager. I just wanted to say I've been working with Katie on this, and I have a few things that I've been working on for the next Birch Grove meeting as well. So I should be able to, like I said, the packet will probably come out towards the end of this week after I've already working with our finance director. A couple of things we're modeling and taking a look at what could happen. There was a question that came into me through the chat, though, I just wanted to pose. The question is, will we know the additional cost before this year's budget decision? And I guess that question, I'm not sure the answer to. I think we're going to, based on the GMP day, we'll kind of know where we're at. But I'm not sure. We'll have to see how that plays into the budget discussion. I guess that's the best way to phrase it, unless Katie has a different way of saying it. I think that's probably accurate.
Yeah, we will know the gross maximum price next week, and we'll talk about where we go from there. But we haven't known the gross maximum price until now, so this is a kind of a big milestone for us. But how it impacts this year's budget is really, I turn back to you, Mike, and ask you to help answer that question. So.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's where I think, unfortunately, it's a tight timeline, right? So if you're not going to get the information out to the committee until May 19th, I'm assuming, like I said, at that point, the conversation is going to be we're projected to be X amount over. And then you're going to have to look at, again, value engineering or whatever else, or changing whatever to see if it's attainable to get it back to the 46 million. And if that comes back and says no, then it's a totally different conversation. And we are going to have to look at what does that mean? Because there would be a lot of decisions to be made off of that tree. And we can't really have those conversations until we know exactly what the number is going to be. So I think we have to take it into some consideration with the budget, but we don't have anything firm to take into consideration until those meetings are had and the numbers are deciphered and we think we've done everything that we can to remediate.
I don't know if this, I can tell you that the efforts to value engineer and keep the costs as low as possible have been very impressive from my perspective. And the feedback I've heard from people who know a heck of a lot more about this than I do at the state have also expressed that they've been impressed with the value engineering and cost reductions that the project team has come up with to date. In talking to the architect today, he was indicating that he didn't think there was a lot more we could do. But those discussions, I think we will have next week. We'll at least start those discussions next week. I think the bottom line is the number that we get next week is going to be very close to the total cost for this project.
Katie, I don't know, like, again, we're kind of speculating right now without having the numbers in that, but depending on what the numbers come back in, if it is a large number, is there any possibility at that point to kind of stick a pin in it and reevaluate like some of the main components of the school? Like, is there the opportunity to kind of look at it and say, well, maybe we do this different or we do that different, or are we down to, I remember one of the other meetings that I was in, it's like, are we down to simply picking the color of the tiles, or do we have the ability here to say, okay, no glass ceiling and, no radiant heating and no third wing kind of a thing? Like, is that still possible at this point?
So there are a couple of knowns that I can talk about, and then there's some unknowns, which obviously I can't.
Like I said, sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
it's speculation, but
absolutely. So let me tell you about what I know. This project, because of the accelerated time frame of the project, and just to take a step back, the project is on an accelerated time frame to benefit Tolland. We are paying a lot of money to lease the modulars. Our students are in much reduced space than they were used to being in, and it's expensive to have them sitting on a field. So in order to get us a new school as fast as reasonably possible, this project was put on an accelerated time frame. Part of doing that meant that the site, steel, and concrete were a package that was done, it was kind of pulled out of the total project and done first. And that meant that decisions about just what I said, site, steel, and concrete have already been made, and that is where the construction is right now. They are, for those of you who might live around Birch Grove, there's trucks kind of going in and out, and they're bringing soil in and out of the site. They have been working on, a small retaining wall on the site. They've been working on getting the footings in on the site. And as I mentioned earlier, the steel has been ordered and will come in starting June 1st. That means that a lot of the structure of this building has already been finalized and in a large part purchased. So when you talk about, or when anybody talks about making substantial changes to the building, you need to remember that the foundation is down or halfway down, 3/4 of the way down right now. And starting June 1st, the steel, which is the frame of the building, will start to be erected. Right now, that steel is being manufactured to the specifications that were put together for this project. So any changes that might happen to the building need to be made with the consideration that we have already completed and started to pay for concrete and steel. Site work as well, although I think we all understand that's a little bit easier to move around a bit, but changes to the building do need to be made with that consideration. So I don't know if that helped answer the question. I think that there are a lot of elements of this building that are kind of locked in. But that doesn't mean that all choice, I think, is out of the picture. When we have been talking about changes now, I heard a change this week that was proposed to change the overhang on some of the building areas to bring it back under a certain width so that it doesn't require fire sprinklers in it. You know, I didn't know that fire sprinklers needed to go in it at all, but that's why we have experts. But they're able to do things like that now. That's what's being instituted now, and what has been looked at and reviewed and removed from the project over the last 6 to 8 weeks. So things like paint color have been considered, and I you know, to be quite frank, and not to be that's not a complete dismiss. There's some money to be saved in making decisions about things like paint color. Quite frankly, it's not a lot of money, but one of the things that was decided on very early in the value engineering process was to make the color scheme in the building simpler, because it's a little bit cheaper to buy fewer colors of paint and to have the painters, you know, paint this hallway one color as opposed to maybe 2 colors or something like that. So paint color decisions don't make a big impact on the bottom line, but things down to the paint colors have been considered, and savings have been found anywhere that they think they can find them.
Okay, and quickly, you did say, this was one of the things that popped into my mind. The steel that we get, you said it's sourced from New York. Is it made in America steel?
So I could go back and check. Off the top of my head, I thought I remembered somebody saying that the steel is coming in part from America and in part from Canada. But if you would like, I can go back and check.
I just want to make sure we're not paying any huge tariffs on it, you know, and supporting American business if we can. But,
Yeah.
you know, and it should be cheaper to buy steel in America these days than get it imported. I don't know about Canada, though. But Lou, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Tammy. I just want to echo what Katie's been saying, that being on the Birch Grove committee, that there's been a lot of value engineering. There's been a lot of tough decisions made, and really that it's at the point now where structurally or design, we really can't do much, and we can't do anything. It's more of trying to see if there's any other areas that we could do to sort of do additional value engineering, cut some additional costs. I think a lot of it's going to come down to hoping that the state will step up and cover some of these additional costs, or if not all of them. But if not, then there's going to be a lot of tough decisions, both as far as because we're trying to put together the best school possible for Tolland. But at the same time, that the committee set a strict budget. And it was, and the town council set strict budget as well, and so I think it's something that we really need to take a look at and make sure that we do the best we can to try and meet within that budget. Thank you.
All right, I don't see anybody else's hands up. So Katie, I appreciate your time. Thank you for the update.
Can I just want to kind of lay one more thing for you guys to think about, and I'm sure I gave you a lot. But the other pressure that we as a building committee have been under is about time. And we've been putting that pressure on our contractor and our architect and the entire project team. But I do anticipate that we will get more information on Tuesday, and we will be asked to act upon it relatively quickly. So just to kind of put that out there for the council's consideration and knowledge.
Do you mean the GMP stuff? Like when you get
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to, what I understand what typically happens is when GMP is presented, it requires a contract modification with the contractor, because we've been under contract with this contractor for a while, and we can't, the budget estimate is the total that we're under contract with. GMP, the intent has always been to modify the contract as appropriate based on GMP. And my understanding is that, basically this happens with every project. Once you get GMP, you tweak the contract total amount. And so we are going to be asked relatively quickly to change the contract amount for the contractor based on GMP. And that discussion that's going to require, the council probably to make some decisions. And I think we're all going to be asked to make these decisions relatively quickly. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that.
So that could be problematic from the perspective of depending on how far, if it's over and if it can't be, that doesn't give a lot of time, I guess, to remediate and try to figure out what the balance is and then what the town has to do moving forward.
That's correct.
So I'm assuming we're going to need a meeting after your meeting, maybe? Mike, I don't know if we need a special meeting or something to understand the full.
Yeah, it sounds like we won't be able to wait. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you froze there. What was that, Mike?
Oh, it sounds like from the, how it's fast we need to do this, it sounds like we might not be able to wait till our 26th May meeting.
Okay, Katie, I'll talk to Mike about a special meeting if we have to, or when you get the information. Again, once you get it, share it, and then we can figure out what we have to. We'll go to the. I'll plan on being on the 19th meeting, and then we'll figure out from there.
Sure, and if anyone has any other questions that come up, please feel free to email it to me, or if you don't know how to get me directly, I'm sure you can send it to Mike and he'll get it over to me too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. That is going to get us up to 7B, reports of town council liaisons.
I have two committee, excuse me, Tammy, I have two committee meeting reports still.
Okay.
Okay. So the first is the Sustainable CT Committee met today. We had a number of people on the call and we were able to give an update on where we stand. We just entered into the third year, I believe, of points reporting. This was our quarterly meeting. We'll have another meeting in 3 months. And then also while our census complete count committee has not met, I want to update you very quickly on the numbers. Currently, Tolland is at 78.3%, and guess what? We're still first in the state. We're first in the state by about 0.5%. I think Marlborough is catching up to us. 10 years ago, our response rate was 82.4%, so we're quickly approaching that number. What's giving us a real advantage about catching that number and surpassing it is that the census takers haven't started going door to door yet. So we have a chance and the opportunity to surpass that number and not allow any other decade to catch up to us. So please respond to that. And those are my two committee reports. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 7B, reports of town council liaisons. Brenda?
Sure, this is Brenda Felucci again. Blight has not had a meeting. We do have a meeting at the moment scheduled for May 21st. Planning and zoning met last night. We had a public hearing on a garage that was, it was allowed to have the variance. We had some new business, which is a waiver on a driveway, which was also allowed. We are setting a public hearing for a brewery in the commercial industrial zone A. So that's moving forward. Looking forward to that. Planning and zoning also took a look at a policy allow outdoor seating for restaurants. It is a temporary policy. It's going to last during the time of this COVID pandemic or until it's rescinded by the planning and zoning. They also had some workshops that encompassed things about business uses, special permits and site plan criteria, home occupation regulations, and roof-mounted solar. It seemed to be the consensus of all of the members on planning and zoning that putting solar panels on any existing roof is absolutely fine. Previously, in previous years, not this current commission, but in previous commissions, they felt that it might be unsightly if it was too close to the road or if it was a building that was outside of the variance. But now everybody's solar's just so common, nobody's considering it unsightly. So I was very excited to see that. And those are my reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Cassandra, trying to do this in my head here. So this is Cassandra, this is your first one.
I know. So I actually didn't make the permanent celebration committee, but I got the minutes from, oh, am I unmuted? You can
Oh,
hear me.
you're there. I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah, we can
good.
hear
Thank
you.
you. Sorry, new headset. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. So permanent celebration committee met on May 7th. And just to remind everyone about the Memorial Day contest that they are doing in lieu of not being able to have the parade. I know I just did a look online on Tolland Open Discussion. I didn't look on TFAN, but maybe, you know, Steve and Brenda or whoever's listening could still try to get this word out about the contest, that they're inviting families to create a display in a yard that's visible from the street to show your appreciation for our fallen service members, and that there will be 60 family members or residents that will receive, 60 residents that will receive a $25 gift certificate from 5 local restaurants and Big Y. And the winners will be announced on Facebook. So there's information on the Permanent Celebration Committee Facebook page. And so they mostly were working on that, and they, where's my notes? Sorry, different. So they're spending up to $1,500 on these gift certificates. They also are going to place wreaths at the memorial at the green, and a white cross, which symbolizes unknown soldiers who gave their life for the country. And they're going to be putting up reusable candles and luminaries to light the green at night during the weekend of Memorial Day. So that sounds like a very nice thing that PCC is doing. So maybe those who are Facebook friendly can put the word out and try to get more individuals in town involved. And then they talked about the harvest event on the green in October. Obviously, everything's up in the air. Cider Mill Run is canceled, and that was discussed and confirmed. And then they're still going to try to have a scarecrow contest for local businesses, but no opening event or closing harvest event occurred. So they're still trying to have some events, obviously, but we can't have a lot of public gatherings. So they're working with what we can. So it sounds like a lot of good things that are still going on.
Madam Chair, as Mike Rosen, Town Manager speaking, I can't raise my hand because I'm one of the co-hosts, but I just wanted to point out that the Memorial Day Parade information was shared on the town's website and Facebook and Twitter. So it's open for everybody to see, not just one group or another. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe, did we do an e-blast on that? I thought we did, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, May 1st. I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
I looked at the town page, Mike. I didn't scroll down far enough, but I just did a search on open, and Mary Susie had shared the contest, but it didn't look like it got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
So I think your post is great. So maybe we could just continue to try to get the word out. It seems like a very great contest with nice prizes for 60 residents. So a lot of winners there.
Yeah, we can try to get some more get some people to understand that better. Okay, is that it? Okay, that goes to Steve then.
Okay, so we actually haven't had any meetings yet. I did share with Mike. I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to share it, but the Conservation Commission provided in advance, and I was going to share it with the Town Council as a map of the proposed mountain bike trail.
I'm going to try to do that right now.
and just it's really impressive. And NEMBA, the New England Motorbike Association, mountain bike, no motorbikes on trails. The Mountain Bike Association has done a lot of efforts to create this trail and create proposed trails going forward using money fundraised through local bike shops.
Okay.
I'm trying to open it. Sorry about that. I'm trying to do that for you, Steve. It doesn't seem to be cooperating.
Yeah, no, it's fine if not. I meant to share it with the council beforehand because I was just really impressed with how much work they've put into it. But otherwise, there's that meeting on Thursday, and then the Water Commission. I don't know if they're actually meeting. They haven't met since, I believe, March, but their next meeting is Monday the 18th. Okay.
If everybody sees their screen, that's with the image.
So it's that orange trail is the proposed trail. I believe it's about, I don't think it's 3 miles. I'm forgetting the exact number of mileage, but it's that orange section is the initial trail. And then as it's developed, the green, the pink, the yellow, the blue would be further developed. And it has a lot of, peaks and runs and other ways that both as a tourist aspect as well as a, active and recreational activity is kind of it'll be definitely a shining point for Tolland.
Is that anywhere else out there, like for people to see by chance, Mike?
I just received it. I can I'll post it somewhere. Yeah, I'll post it on the
Yeah, we'll
town's
figure out
website.
some place to get it out there.
Maybe we can coordinate on where best to put it. I'll put it on the news. Yeah, I'll put it on the news feed.
Okay. Anything else, Steve?
Nope. I am all set. Steve Jones, all set. Thank you.
Hey, I'm thinking, John.
I am liaison to WPCA. They did not meet, so I have nothing to report.
Okie dokie. Lou? We just did Birch Grove, so.
Liaison to Birch Grove and Katie. Yeah, so my update was with Katie, so I'm all good. Thank you.
Kurt?
All right, so I went to the Agricultural Commission meeting on Monday, May 4th, and they discussed the biggest takeaway was they discussed a proposal for to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission to discuss some changes to regulations regarding farming and chickens and how many people can own, stuff like that. It was a great discussion, so hopefully the Planning and Zoning will get that next and help the farmers out. So that's all I have.
I'm looking forward to the chicken conversation. Tolland, the town of chickens. I love it. Okay, so I had a few meetings. First of all, since our last time, where is my, we had an, nope, not that one. Board of Education, there's been quite a few Board of Education meetings. The last couple special ones have been around budget talks, and we'll be having a joint meeting with them on the 21st. But just yesterday, there was a great call with Mike, they maxed out with 100 people. And I know that there were other people that wanted to get into the call, but it was a call on graduation and what the town is going to be able to do. And Dr. Willett presented some scenarios. The board members talked back and forth. The majority seemed to be in favor of finding a way to do an in-person graduation. And the majority of the people who spoke, which were seniors and parents of seniors, families that were on together, and that were all in favor of doing an in-person graduation also. I know we have Rob on the phone, but there was some talk about dealing with the EHHD and when that would be possible if they suspended it out to July. But it was a really good meeting. If you have the opportunity to go and watch it, especially if you have a family that is in the school that may not have known about it or wasn't able to get onto the call. Trying to think what else there was. We had an EHHD meeting, but it was, I think that was beforehand. So that's really it for me. We just had a joint meeting prior to this call with the historic district in town to start conversations and understanding and kind of open up some pathways, no pun intended, about the sidewalks of the town green and seeing what we can do to make them accessible for all of our residents. I think that's about it for me. If I look through here, that would then get us to 8-1, new business. Consideration of a resolution authorizing the town manager to enter into a contract with special counsel Lloyd L. Langhammer to assist in the defense of assessed values.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Mike Rosen, town manager speaking. I know I'm having some lag problems with my internet connection, so I'm sorry if I'm spotty in any way, but right now it seems to be clear. I also wanted to acknowledge that Jason Lawrence, our town assessor, is on the line. I asked him to join us tonight because this is an item that Jason brought to my attention as a favorable situation for the town. So in the packet for tonight, I mentioned that the assessor requested the use of a special legal counsel, Lloyd Langhammer, who's an experienced real estate attorney. And he specializes in litigations to Superior Court for state tax appeals and things like that. So for specifically for municipalities. So whereas our whereas our legal attorney is more of a generalist, Mr. Langhammer, Attorney Langhammer, is a specialist. So, we just went through the revaluation process. We expect that that's going to yield a couple of cases. And, Jason, maybe you can shade a little bit of light on that. But basically what Jason's interacted with the attorney, the special counsel. They've agreed upon the same pay rate as our town counsel, as our town attorney. And I think it's an overall good situation that's going to yield a better situation for the town when it comes to tax appeals that go to Superior Court. Jason, maybe you can just add a little bit more onto this and maybe why it's a good idea for the town to engage.
Sure. Everybody hear me all right?
Hey, Jason.
Hi. As you may know, people who have a problem with their assessment can appeal their assessment. They start off by appealing to the Board of Appeals. From the decision of the Board of Appeals, they have 60 days to file to the Superior Court to appeal that decision. We don't know who would come in during that period. It's a kind of a wait and see, but in the year of a reval, it's the year that typically you're going to get the most appeals you're going to get. Part of that is because people want to set a precedent for the next 5 years, and then the rest of it is there's been a big uptick in tax reps who will solicit themselves to some of our biggest taxpayers on a contingency basis. So they'll file an appeal for, say, a Big Y or somebody else, and they'll do it for free. And what they get for payment is a 50% of the savings over the 5-year period. So the first year after a reval is typically when we see a lot of those appeals. The last reval in 2014, it was such a small increase, we didn't see a lot of appeals, and I was able to handle those on my own with Rick Conti. Not a problem. But as they've gotten a little bit more, these tax reps have gotten a little bit more vicious, and they're actually, soliciting these. They'll cold call like a Big Y and say, "Hey, we can save you taxes. What we want to do is file an appeal for you, and then for free, which is only about $400 anyway. It's not a big cost, but they say whatever we get, we'll split with you over the 5 years of the savings." So they have their specialized attorneys and these tax reps against basically me and the town attorney, who isn't the best suited to go to defense for these values. There's just little loopholes in the law that can be taken advantage of that sometimes we don't. And also, I think that it's good to have somebody on our side that's a little bit more versed in assessment and the laws associated with assessment versus the I feel like general knowledge of the town attorney.
Jason, how many appeals do we have in like a typical year?
For real estate, we may have, 5 to 10 that are just based on normal difference of opinion of value. We've been having 10 or more foundation loan appeals, which are not really an appeal, more of a filing of the paperwork, and it was late, so we get them through the Board of Appeals. So, but going to court, if we get 1 or 2 of those a year, that's as many as we get. In a reval year, you tend to get the bulk of them, 10 to 15. We only have 100 commercials in town. They tend to be the commercial properties that go to that process. But for instance, when Shinipsit Lake, the nursing home there, Wood Lake, came online and became taxable, they appealed their assessment in 2016, I believe it was, because they were now taxable. So they came on as an appeal halfway through the reval cycle because they were now going to be taxed, and they wanted to make sure that they were in a good place. So it would have been nice at that point to have a real estate attorney to help me through that process. So maybe we would have had a better verdict. I don't know, but.
And of those 10 to 15 that we're going to get in a reval year, how many of them do you think go to court?
Well, that would be in 2014. I want to say, I don't have the exact number, but there was probably 5 of those that went through to court. Never not to trial, but to a pretrial basis. So they'll file their paperwork with Superior Court. We'll have a pretrial. They'll try to settle, which is always the case. And a settlement is just a loss for the town. And if I want to take them to trial, because I think my number is strong and we're good with it, then that's when we would, actually go to trial, and it actually costs some attorney fees. Prior to that, it's this hourly rate. And in the past, they don't spend a lot of time with it. It's not a huge cost, but when you're talking about $1 million in assessment, it adds up really fast.
Yeah.
When you're 2 million apart, and you settle at a $1 million reduction, there's 30 grand gone, like really fast. So it adds up fast. So just paying an attorney that has that expertise could save us, that much in one case. Never mind the potential to have a case maybe thrown out instead of even going through the process because they file incorrectly or late. And there's some loopholes that we might be able to take advantage of from time to time instead of having to go through this process. So.
Okay, and then I have one last question before I jump over to the counselors. Of the ones that would go to court, what's our typical success rate, or what does success look like now? Whereas with a new attorney, we think it's going to be better. Is success a settlement, like a compromise, or
a success would be holding our number, so I hate to throw anybody out there, but say we had a $3 million building, industrial building or something, and they came in with a $2 million appraisal. I would hope to be settling at 2.5. It's always a split. The judges are they're so pushed to settle because there's so many cases that have been brought to tax court that their whole job is to just settle them as fast as you can. So it's what will you give? How much will you give? But we always lose when we go. If I come in at $6 million on a building, I go in there and it's all right. How much bleeding are we going to do? So the whole point of this is to try to have no bleeding and have the number that I put on it originally at time of reval hold true.
So we think that with this new lawyer, we'll be able to improve on that.
Yeah, I mean, just trying to think of the actual number for Wood Lake. we carried $11 million on Woodlake prior to that going taxable when it sold the Prospect. The number was a little bit off because it was an exempt property and nobody really cared. They didn't ever argue ECHN never argued the value because they didn't care. They weren't paying taxes on it anyway. So when Prospect bought it, it didn't sold as a package deal with Manchester Memorial Hospital and Rockville Hospital. And it was whatever, couple $100 million it sold for. So they allocated a number to Woodlake, and they came in and said it was worth like $6 million. We ended up settling at around 8 something. And then shortly after that, it sold as part of a sale leaseback for 10 million, I think it was. So, that 10 million could have been the number instead of the 8 that we ended up settling for. So, I mean, you never know. Those are the big ticket ones. Some of these might only be, 50, 60,000 or 500,000. At the end of the day right now, every penny counts. So this is part of me trying to say, hey, we can save a little bit more money here by maybe spending a little bit more, because Attorney Langhammer will spend a little bit more time. So even though his hourly rate is the same, he'll probably spend, double the time that Rick would, or Bianca, or whoever is working for Rick at the time on a project. But $180 an hour could get saved with one case,
Right. Steve?
Okay, Steve Jones, Town Council. Jason, do we know where is the Attorney Langhammer based out of? And just as a follow-up, do we know kind of how the process is going to be for his services in light of COVID in terms of appearing before a superior court or providing those services and being in contact with the town? Just thinking of other attorneys like Rick Conti that probably in the past would come into town hall and work with everybody face to face. What's the procedure in light of COVID?
Well, Attorney Langhammer is out of New London, but he works for at least 5 or 6 municipalities that I know of, and they're all spread out. Tolland would be the most north that he works. But right now with COVID going on, I'm sure most everything would be virtual. But we would meet, I would share any documents I have with whoever has filed an appeal. What happens is they file their appeal. Sheila in the clerk's office gets notified. She contacts both me and the town attorney to let them know that a case has been filed. And then I usually get contacted by Rick and say, okay, let's get started on this case. What do you know? And then we share information. Right now, I would probably put together a packet and send it off to Lloyd Langhammer if, whatever paperwork he needed. If he needed to come meet, then we would meet. But
okay, and then just one other question, if you know it, how is the appeals process through the Superior Court being done through Rockville or another location?
it starts in Rockville, and then what happens is nothing gets heard there. It usually ends up going to New Britain. So you go to Rockville, you usually have a pre-trial to see if there's room to move. Once you determine that most likely neither the appellant or the town is happy, then we go to New Britain. We do a pre-trial in New Britain, and then if it goes to trial, that's all still in New Britain.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Brenda?
This is Brenda Felicity. You just answered my question, so thank you very much.
Lou?
With Jason's assessment that having experience in real estate law and a very specialized area, and I think that even if we get one good settlement out of it or one good ruling out of it, that it will pay for itself in whatever cost that we would have to pay for an additional attorney. I think it's just such a niche area that we really should consider it. especially during the reevaluation period now. Thank you.
Kurt?
Quick question. There's no retainer for Mr. Lloyd or Langhammer, sorry. Is it just based on if he's taking, if we're working a case or not? Is that how it's going, correct?
Yeah, if a case gets filed, then he's alerted, and then he would bill on an hourly rate just like the town attorney would.
Mm-hmm.
And I can offer, this is Mike Rosen, town manager speaking. I can offer that when Jason brought this to my attention a couple of weeks ago, I actually reached out to our town attorney to run the idea by him, and he actually agreed with this strategy. He said it is likely to be more favorable for the town based on a specialist going in. Rick was happy to have our business in this industry for this, but he acknowledged that it's probably a good idea for the town to go with a specialist for especially the big high dollar cases.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, Steve?
All right, Madam Chair, I'd entertain a motion to, I'm just pulling up the resolution, or the draft resolution, that the town council authorized town manager Mike Rosen to enter into a contract with special counsel Lloyd L. Langhammer to assist the town assessor in the defense of assessed values.
Lulu, I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, then by a roll call vote, Brenda?
Aye.
Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt? Kurt?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so Lisa, that passes unanimously. And that gets us on to 8-2, COVID-19 update.
Again, good evening, everybody. Mike Rosen, town manager speaking. I wanted to acknowledge that, as always, we appreciate that we have some experts who are here tonight. Rob Miller from the Health District, Walt Willett from the schools, and John Lytell, our fire chief and emergency management director. They've been my right, left, and middle hands during this emergency, and we've been interacting very well all throughout this last couple of months now. I see these guys every day, and as well as many other people who make up our EOC team. So I guess in respect for everyone's time here, I would like maybe to turn over to the three of them, or if any of them have any pertinent updates. I know at the outset of this meeting, there were some questions about the number of cases Tolland has had, and I know Director Miller would probably be able to address that. I do believe that's continuous cases. That's not people who are currently sick. That's all cases that's a continuously counting number. Yeah, total number.
It's total.
I don't know if Rob, if you want to go first.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Rob Miller, Health Director for the Eastern Highlands Health District. Can you guys hear me okay?
We got you, Rob.
Okay, good. Yes, to answer the first question, the 39 cases is an accumulation, a cumulative number over time. Does not reflect the number of resolved cases that are likely in the community. Right now, the systems that we have in place, unfortunately, aren't tracking resolved cases, not only locally or statewide. I'm hopeful that a new system that's going to be rolled out in the coming weeks as part of the enhanced program to do contact tracing will include functionality which will track resolved cases, but we're still waiting to see for sure on that point. Really, the one data point that is tracking a net number statewide, and that is total hospitalizations. So the number put out by the state of Connecticut for hospitalizations is net and is provided by Connecticut Hospital Association, which is one reason why it provides a good measure of how we're progressing in this particular outbreak. As for other items to update the council on, health district wide, we're again total cumulative number 152 cases, 9 fatalities, 29 hospitalizations. My hospitalizations are again a cumulative and not net like the statewide number is. Tolland, as we know, 39 cumulative cases, 10 hospitalizations, again cumulative, and unfortunately 4 fatalities. The good news is that the state is on a solid 18-day trend of declining hospitalizations. That's a very solid trend. It's certainly beyond the full 2-week or 14-day measure, which is one of the thresholds for being able to go into phase 1 recovery. And so kind of the other 2 pieces of the phase 1 recovery, as outlined by the governor, in addition to those positive outcome measures, include also, expanded testing capacity in the state and the community, and expanded capacity to do contact tracing. As I alluded to just a moment ago, there is a new system coming out that's being rolled out very soon. The Eastern Highlands Health District has agreed to be a beta test site for the new contact tracing system. Myself and staff anticipate seeing that system for the first time, hopefully sometime this week. And then next week, we'll actually start beta testing it, us along with a number of other local health departments across the state. We've currently completed 115 case contact investigations. There are 33 still active. I think about 3 or 4 of them are in Tolland. Yesterday, the Eastern Highlands Health District Executive Committee met and authorized me to waive all fees associated with any temporary changes to restaurants. Anybody proposing a temporary outdoor seating arrangement in response to the COVID-19, and in an effort to support our local businesses to open up in an expedited fashion with doing as much with minimizing harm as much as possible. My staff has been directed to work with local officials, including those in Tolland, to work and support those local businesses and restaurants that may be seeking to take advantage of the governor's phase 1 Reopen Connecticut initiative. On the volunteer front, we're up to 87 Medical Reserve Corps volunteers. A number of them are from Tolland. We've been receiving personal protective equipment on a weekly basis as part of the statewide distribution. The PPE we receive at the local health department level is earmarked for private healthcare providers in the community. There are 3 or 4 in Tolland that we've been supplying with PPE on a regular basis. To date, the health district has distributed about 4,800 masks and N95s, 400 gowns, 738 face shields, about 10,000 gloves to 19 different healthcare providers in our communities. We've also been working with Tolland officials. I know I've been working with Bruce Watt, Rec Director, and his efforts to try to navigate and wade through the Office of Early Childhood guidelines for opening up summer camps, and also continue to work with Town Manager Rosen and his efforts to support and protect town employees. We'll be meeting very soon to talk about plans to figure out how to maybe reopen town buildings, but while still protecting both town employees and the public. And that's the extent of my report.
Thank you, Rob. Who do we want to, John?
So, John Lytell, fire chief, public safety director, and emergency management director for the town. It's been a battle. Obviously, you see the numbers going up, and like Rob said, actually been calling Rob a lot lately, and Rob texts me on the weekend, which I greatly appreciate. But we're trying to, obviously track our numbers and track what's going on. Same as Rob, we've been getting our PPE from the DPH deployment sites in West Hartford, and that happens on every Tuesday, and then another pickup on Wednesdays. We've been very fortunate to have some volunteers that have signed up on our list that we've been using some volunteer staffing of citizens that have signed up that have been going to get the PPE for us. So it's been a battle. Staff has had a rough week last week. I actually reached out to Rob to even try to hook up the healthcare providers that are private, that are doing our nursing or private home healthcare checks to, if they need PPE, to reach out to the health district, because we've had a couple agencies that have not been going into some houses. And obviously last week was a bad week for us. Late Thursday night, we lost one of our own members' mothers, and that was a long night. And Friday, we dealt with another family in town that lost one of their fathers, and we took their mother in. And there's nothing worse on a day-to-day basis getting a call from one of the hospitals to make sure that our staff was protected with PPE, and it has been confirmed that the COVID cases are, they were exposed to. So we're doing the best effort we can to protect our staff. The paperwork is just horrendous. The phone calls, the Zoom meetings, and everything else wise, it's starting to take a mental toll on some staffing. We have a few members that are out that can't be exposed to this kind of virus, volunteer wise. I'm very fortunate to say, as the county, I'm also a county coordinator for the 19 towns throughout Tolland County. We were able to adopt a formal plan to share staff if it got overwhelming for any agency or department. So if we needed to send one of our people to another town, which one of the towns close to us lost all their career paid staff during the daytime, and they had to resource with the towns of Mansfield, Yukon, and us to assure that they had staffing to run their ambulance or service for the fire department. So we're fortunate that the plan's been run through the town manager. It's just a simple MOU plan, and it kind of covers all the bases. But those towns hiring our staffing would be billed for our staffing, and vice versa if we ever came into that entity to need that. So it's a nice reassurance plan. It's a plan that's been adopted from out of Massachusetts, been vetted by every attorney. So we've been fortunate enough to have enough staffing to keep things stable. But I can tell you a lot of staffing aren't coming out for a lot of the calls. It's been a fortunate situation over the last week to two with the house fire and some other situations. But this evening, myself and Mike Rosen were emailed a plan as far as some of our church religion groups in town, which we've been working with very heavily week after week. And they actually came up with a very nice template. Very fortunate to Holly Hood from the Eastern Health Highlands District that forward over some templates and something that we would want to probably, myself and Mr. Rosen would probably want to forward over to the health district. Some of the churches and religion groups are wanting to get back together, and they've never been sanctioned by anything. They could have 50 people, but we've asked them to come up with a plan to safeguard things. So we'll probably run that plan through Rob Miller and his staff to assure any recommendations or guidance. But I can tell you that looking while we were on a Zoom meeting for the last hour, some of the plans, one of the churches wants to open up the 17th. So they have a template. I got to forward over to Rob to just double check, and any guidance that we can assist them or help them with. Obviously, we would as a community. But the church groups and the religion groups in town have been very fortunate with myself and Mike Rose and the staff of having weekly phone calls or Zoom meetings that we've been very fortunate as a community to keep all the religion groups together, working together. So we're very fortunate in Tolland to have that. They've been a huge asset to the community to take care of their own. they've been reaching out to their special needs or their elderly populations. We keep the weekly food drive going at the Tolland Training Center, EOC wide. We've been very fortunate with a lot of residents dropping off food. So I think we've been very fortunate. I don't think Bev's on the phone or the Zoom meeting tonight, but I think Bev and her staff have been doing an excellent job keeping up the food pantry for our community. We haven't seen a huge increase of anything for the food stuff through the community, but very fortunate to the residents dropping stuff off on a weekly basis, which is nice. And our staff with the volunteers, we've lowered and relaxed a little bit the EOC volunteer-wise, not trying to get people exposed or bring down, but very fortunate to have some of the volunteers come in on a Monday or throughout the week to kind of sort through the food, and then we actually separate it so it's quarantined for a week or so before we bring it down to the senior center to put on the shelves. But Fran, Becky, and Bev and Nancy Dunn have been doing a phenomenal job keeping things stable. If there's a message to get out to the community, now's the time to sign up if there's needs assistance, whether it's through the religion group or the community senior center and a food bank, to get those services that are there in place, because I think we're going to be in this for a little while. I know that phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 are coming up, but a little nervous I am. What's happening, around. I haven't released a lot of information, but obviously you all watch the news like I do, and news is news, and people can say CNN is CNN, but Massachusetts is going through a little spike right now, and their first responders did a test through MIT of some of the PPE that's been delivered through the United States through China. Doing some testing on the PPE. So now I have staff questioning if I've looked at the PPE or tested or looked at some stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that we can't wear. And OSHA finally released a document 2 weeks ago as far as the correct face mask. So just throwing another axe into the grind. But it's something that we got to look at. Been very fortunate with the residents. We have a private doctor in town that's hooked up and connected with the community. That her husband is on the front line. She's on the front line. But they've been very fortunate to have connections in the community that have made a lot of face masks. And I know Brenda Falusi has made some, and some other people have made some as far as dropping off some of the face masks. And we want to try to ensure that we get enough face masks for the employees and the rest of the staff, that if we do a soft opening or opening, that each of the staff members have enough masks. I was able to give Scott Lappin a couple of boxes of masks that came in through some of our shipments to assure that we have them in town hall in case we do a slight opening or a light opening, that residents, if they forgot their masks, have one to come into town hall, or if they have to deal with the town clerk for weddings or different things, they have the proper stuff to protect them or the employees. So I think we're all scared. It's been very taxing. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's wearing. It's really, really wearing. To just see the families and see the people. It's sad. It's really, really sad. But we have a strong community, and it's nice to see the signs around Tolland of thank yous, and Tolland strong. I saw some of the sport groups. I'm not going to lie to you. So if I know Walt's on the line tonight. I know I've called Jim Deneen, and I'd love to share the video that Jim Deneen, our principal, and his kids put a video together thanking a lot of the first responders, and it was sent to me, and I can tell you that I'm thinking about it right now, and it's bringing tears to my eyes. What a heartfelt thank you from our kids and the staff and everything else. You can see them in front of my garage because this is where I live now. I live outside. I can't come inside some nights because I try not to bring my job home or inside. My wife's a school teacher in town, and what she's going through and the teachers are going through and the staff and everything else, we're all in this together, whether you're working from home or, whether you're at home and driving yourself nuts, not getting out. And the weather hasn't been the greatest. I mean, it snowed Saturday. So we're in this together, and I can't thank enough for the support of the council, the residents, Walt, what Walt's doing with the community, feeding the kids. And I know that's seen an upbeat of a lot of the families. And, a lot of people are asking, well, geez, why are you going up? It's just to keep the kids in a routine and go up and get a lunch and see the school or be a part of it. I'm afraid what's going to happen towards the fall. When we all try to really get back together or do something. You can see that pools are on the rise. I'm sure that's going to increase our planning and zoning with permits and everything else. People are buying pools and doing more, home things this year and everything else. So if I could say anything as a community, we need to stick together and get through this together. And I know I'm probably one of the biggest pain in the butts in town every once in a while. And I know I release my stress by sometimes not saying the right things, but I'm sorry. And if I could say anything, I can't thank enough for the support for the community and the masks and the donations have been dropped off. There was a couple of businesses that stopped by this week and dropped off gift certificates. An older lady came in today. I said, "What are you doing out of your house?" And she dropped off homemade muffins and everything else. So I divided them up among the stations and dropped them off to the guys and stuff like that. But a couple of the restaurants that opened up want to do a food or drop off or something for the guys. Even the small things of, Walt and his staff dropped off cookies to the staff. You have no idea how much that means. So, like I said, I can't thank everybody enough. Unfortunately, there's been some mixes this week with some politics and different things. The commissioner of DPH has been replaced, and I had a dialogue going with her for the last 2 weeks. So she's been replaced this week here. So I sent another email today. I got to send the plans over to Rob Miller and Walt. But, obviously we're trying to keep business going. So one of the things that's on my tax as a public safety director is we want to waive the licensing for dogs and stuff like that, but vets aren't opened up. So I finally got a plan to send over to Rob and his staff for approval, but we want to try to do a drive-through clinic to keep dogs vaccinated. So we're trying to set up a plan for that right now. If that's something I can use the school, the back of maybe the school or high school on a weekend to do a drive-through rabies clinic and just assure that, because that's something that we think about because we don't want that to happen as well. But something I got to send Rob the plan for approval in the health department. But we'd like to do the rabies clinic in sometime in June, something that we do every single year for, low cost and effective wise. So we're working on that. I got to send a plan out. Just got the final map and everything else. And I got to get approval from Walt and the town manager and the health department. But we'd like to host the rabies clinic in Tolland for June. But, I think we'll see an increase in that. We haven't not seen an increase in the food share program through the Congregational Church. I know some people go from town to town, but you can see what happens every morning or every week from the Wrenchler's Field food share. So, if I could say anything in the Facebook, and I'm not on any Facebook or Friends in Tolland or the social groups that we have, but I think as it gets panned out here, we really need to make sure that our residents are checking on their neighbors or other ones, because every once in a while we come across a house that we respond to during a day that there's nothing in the refrigerator. They haven't reached out to anybody. And I can tell you, it's sad to see the family members come to the house where, they all been exposed and they have COVID or they can't. And, there's nothing worse than my weekend was wrecked. I'm not gonna lie to you. It was a very bad Mother's Day weekend. Dealing with a longtime resident in Tolland that lost his father, and we took his mother in. And I called Rob, obviously, and Rob could only do so much for us as well. But we took her in, and I don't think she's going to pull through either. But good family in town reached out to me. There's nothing worse starting a day like that. So, if anything, thanks for all your support. My staff, really appreciates it, and we got a great department. We got a great town. We got a lot of good people. So, we'll try to get through this as best as we can. The weather's getting better, so thanks again for everything.
Chief, I want to let you know you received a piece of fan mail on the chat box. It says, "We love you, Chief," from Susan. So just want to let you know that.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm sorry if I'm getting emotional. It's hard to live in town, work in town, or have your wife that works in town. And one of Walt's students dropped off a hope rock in front of my office door the other day. There's nothing that I guess pushes me to do more. And I'm probably one of Mike's biggest pain in the butts, or Rob's biggest pain in the butts, and sometimes Walt's biggest pain in the butts. But I don't know. I'm sorry for everything I've done, and I can't thank everybody enough for the support. And I'm tired. I'm not gonna lie to anybody. Trying to get through this. Got some major projects, and nothing for nothing. Politics are politics, but did my best to cut the budget the best I could because we're in this together. I live in town too, and we'll try to get through this together and save money and try to do the best for the next year or two. So I don't know. That's pretty much wrap up. We've been trying to take care of our businesses. If anybody can get a note out to the business, I'm going to try to do everything I can to try to support the businesses as far as doing plans. And there's no simple template out there, but we want to try to strive to get people opened. And the state is still doing the unless Rob's got something different than I do, but the state's still giving away the mass of the businesses, and I would encourage every business to sign up on that. And we try to open up the EOC on Wednesdays to do a drive-through to hand out the mass of the businesses. And if anything, it's a reassurance. And if we can all still safeguard this for a couple more weeks, a couple more months, and I think Rob would agree with me, practice safely and be safe, and not jump back into this heavily. We'll hopefully all get through this. So like I said, thanks a lot.
You are very appreciated, John.
I'm sorry.
You are very appreciated.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Chief.
I have to agree, John. Steve Jones here, that you just do so much. And I think even in light of all these weather incidents that we've had, you've gone above and beyond, and working with Public Works, working with everybody in the community to make sure everybody can kind of maintain as much of a normal as possible. So I hope you do take some time to try and get some normality for yourself through this really unprecedented situation. Take some time to smile and stay hopeful. A lot of us are. It's been a lot of hills and valleys emotionally, and it just makes you human, and it makes you common, and it makes me feel humble that not everyone's perfect. So please just stay strong, stay in touch, and let us know any way that we can continue helping you.
I appreciate it. I mean, Tammy will get a bit of this from home reality. I was very fortunate. Friday, my daughter got accepted to the Southern nursing program, and now they're
awesome.
So, it's one of those things you look back and forth, and she was actually going to law enforcement. She was going to law enforcement, and she came home after Trooper Miller's accident and said, "Daddy, I can't do this. I'm watching you hurt." And then all of a sudden this hits up, and she's like, "Daddy, you need to retire." And then she gets accepted to nursing. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Coaster.
She's got a hard road. That's a good one. I understand that one all too well, but I'm glad she got into Southern. I remember us having those chats. It'll be good for her, but she's jumping right in after you. There's no relief from that. So, you raised a good one there.
Thank you.
Gave her a good person to look up to. Tell her I'm proud of her. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything for the chief? John, feel free to drop off, go have a drink, sit down, by a fire with Carm, and we'll all be here tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Let's go over to Dr. Willett.
Yeah, I was just going to say, John, the level 2 care package that's a little bit more involved than the cookies. I think it has Tito's and Smirnoff. That's probably the next one coming your way.
Graciously appreciate that. I'll take that.
Throw a bottle of wine in there for Carm.
Might have to drive that on over tonight. I'll make it quick. The lunch menu, breakfast and lunch program, meal programs still going very strong. Still in the thousands over the weekend and many hundreds during the week. We are now starting to look at modified schedules for next year. The state's guidance has been pretty thin, but we're hoping to get more guidance as the next few weeks come out and they get a little bit more clear as to what they're looking for and what the governor's requirements will be. But things have been thrown around like only being able to have class sizes of 10. So class sizes of 10 means a large shift in how we would operate. And so we're starting to draw up plans for what that might look like should that be what we have to deal with next year. And so we'll see a little bit more about that as time goes on. We have a graduation task force, as Ms. Nucci had mentioned last night, or the other night was discussed. So we're in the process of putting that together. And we're updating the school's pandemic plan, and we continue to do our work on what we call Project Uplift, which is a variety of activities in the school and community that are meant to kind of lift the spirits a bit. So I'll keep it short tonight. I know you have a long meeting, but that's essentially where we're at right now for the schools, and happy to help in any way that I can.
Dr. Willett, I can honestly say I'm loving all the videos from all the kids and the sing-alongs and all that. I'm waiting for, I don't know if Tolland still has an alma mater, but when I graduated, our chorus alma mater, like the song, oh my God, I can't remember the name of it now. It's literally on the tip of my tongue. I'm waiting to see that one. But I've enjoyed seeing the videos and that.
Oh, good. Yeah. We're our own little Hollywood going on over here right now.
We are.
Putting out lots of productions. Hollywood, they got nothing on us. We're all over it.
Right. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Willett?
Hey, Walt, two things. If I could, if you could just get a hold of Jim Deneen and I could share that video with the town.
Sure.
I know it's got some kids in it. I did call them and ask them before I want to send it out socially, but I think the community, I think some people already saw it, but I think more people need to see that video with those kids. Thanking the healthcare responders and everybody else from Big Y and all the first responders and delivery people and everything else wise. It's just, if it doesn't bring a tear to your eye, then I don't know. You need 211 or something, but if I could share that with that, and then whatever you do for graduation, please keep me in the loop. I think the kids deserve it. Whatever I can do to help this community and the towns for those kids on graduation. Off the record, I'd love to really personally fly the big flag, whatever you do, or put some type of message out there. So whatever we can do to support that, those kids deserve something,
Yeah, no, I agree. And yes, we will, of course.
Brenda?
Yes, this is Brenda Felicity, Town Council. I just want to say, Dr. Willett, that thank you very much for the daily updates. I'm getting a lot of feedback from residents that those have been very helpful
good.
on top of everything. So again, just thank you for all that you're doing and all of that your staff and administration is doing. Thank you.
Of course.
Anybody else? All right, then thank you very much, Dr. Willett.
Sure.
That gets us to 8.3, which is discussion and presentation on the full year 2021 revised budget overview.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Mike Rosen, Town Manager. I also just want to echo thanks for John, Walt, and Rob for being on this call as always. They're fantastic for the community. They like I said, they've been such a great help helping me in my first year here, and nobody ever expected a pandemic. So you guys are great, and all the staff and all the support we're getting, everyone's been great. So thank you. Before we jump into budget stuff, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to see if I could put the presentation up so I can kind of use it like a PowerPoint here. Let's see if this works. Okay, let's go to the page here. Can everybody see that okay? It's got the slideshow?
Yep.
Great. So I'm going to kind of use this as a slideshow here. Mike Rosen, Town Manager. We left off with the budget 2 weeks ago. The council had asked me to take a look at, through some straw poll votes, to take a look at revisiting the budget, the town manager's recommended budget, which was originally submitted back in early March. At that time, when we're going to get into some more specifics and throughout the slideshow, we had a certain budget that we had put forward. Within that budget, there was the Board of Ed recommended budget. There was the town recommended budget. There was the combined budget. It had the capital plan and debt, and everything was all baked into it. Obviously, times have changed in the last 2 months, and very quickly had to sort of scramble and sort of understand what the new world will look like in the new budget for the town of Tolland, and digesting what was said at our last meeting about trying to explore a no mill rate increase budget and to see how close we can get to doing that. So what I'd like to do today is kind of go through a slideshow I've put together that's going to explain a little bit about where we are, where we were, where we're going. And then 2 weeks from now, on the May 26th, I will be presenting you with my formal recommendation. This is, I wouldn't call it high level. It's not a high level. There are some things that are in here that are specific to our situation, but this is not the perfect numbers. That will be at our next meeting on the 26th. So that'll be my formal recommendation. This is sort of just the precursor to that. So what is a balanced budget? This is pretty much budget 101 here. Revenues have to equal expenditures at the end of the day. So for the town of Tolland, our revenues generally are comprised of about 4 to 5 categories. Property tax makes up a very large percentage of our revenues. It's broken down between residential and commercial property tax. Then we have state aid, which is like, state grants or federal grants as well, but that's sort of minimal. But ECS funding is part of that, as well as other grants such as LoCIP, TAR, and municipal stabilization. And we're going to get into all those things in a little bit. There's also investment income, which is interest received for the town's accounts that we have balance in, that generates interest that we can put towards next year's budget to offset expenditures. And then local receipts, those are your various fees that we charge for services, going to the clerk's office, going to the zoning department. If you have a library fee, all of that's sort of embedded into local receipts. On the expenditure side, it's no surprise the main drivers of those are payroll, materials, utilities, fuel, electricity, things like that. Programs and services, obviously everything costs money that we enjoy for the town, but we have to look at it that these are services that the town has come to expect, and they are budget drivers. Capital projects obviously have an impact to expenditures, and don't forget about insurance and benefits for the town employees, and that's and the school employees as well. That's one of the major budget drivers that we're going to touch on. I put this little bold note down here that says, at the end of the year, if revenues do not offset expenditures, there is the need to use fund balance to cover costs. It's worth noting that the town annually does plan to use some portion of our fund balance to offset expenditures, but generally it's what is needed to cover expected cost gaps to ease burden to the taxpayers. It's sort of a way for us to build in using some cash so that the taxpayers, being the main revenue source for the community, do not have to end up funding everything out of their tax revenue. It's built into the model that we do use some cash. This is a slide that was originally presented as part of my budget back in March, but what this shows is that for fiscal year 1920 and then also 2021, the blue portion of that bar graph is how much property tax makes up as a percentage of our overall revenue sources in town. So property taxes between commercial and mainly residential make up 81% of our overall revenue stream. We're heavily, heavily reliant on property taxes. 16%, 16.66 this year is state aid. And the main component of that is the ECS funding, which is this year, it's about $9.1 million. In past, it's been higher, and it's going to be trending lower in the future. And other sources is that little green, that's the local receipts. That's the investment income that I mentioned on this slide. So as you can see, it's just a 2% source of everything. I believe the use of fund balance might be in there as well. So that's just an illustration of how that works in revenue. The factors that drive mill rate, I've touched on this already, but salary increases for the staff on both the town and the schools, contractual increases for services that we do contract or have consultants that do services, or other sorts of contractual increases, whether it's utilities and things like that. We do have a debt program here, which is very well managed, and we try to build in debt. We try to layer it in so no one year spikes too high. You'll see in the overall debt plan that that was presented back in March, that we do have scheduled debt increases that come on the books over the next few years. That's mainly for Birch Grove School. There are some other projects also that are going to be coming on the books in the future, such as a few years down the line, we're hoping to have some renovation and reconstruction of some of the town's fire stations, which we have a placeholder amount in there for the capital budget, but that's something that'll come on down the line as well. New program costs without an offset. Generally, if it's a program that somebody suggests we do or the council recommends that the staff do, but it's a program that doesn't have a revenue offset, well, naturally that's going to drive the mill rate higher because you just introduced an expense that doesn't have a revenue. So that'll drive the mill rate. Reallocation of other revenue sources. Mainly what I meant by that was for state aid, as especially with ECS, as that is allocated to other communities over time, we're generally losing about $300,000 to $330,000 a year of our revenue stream. But again, it's a reallocation it's a model that the state had given to us to sort of make do with, and that's something that we've built into our modeling, and we have to be cognizant of year over year. Next bullet is loss of grand list value, which, is no surprise to anybody. Tolland is a community that's been very affected by crumbling foundations. So we just had a reval year. There was an overall decrease in grand list value. It wasn't too much, but it still had an impact to our modeling. And, every year we do have more and more homes that come forward, as Jason mentioned on his, when he was on before from the assessor's office, that homes do have crumbling foundations and they will apply for abatements and exemptions. And as they do, we do lose value of our grand list. So there's overall less revenue to go around because of that. And then just the last bullet on this slide is talking about usage of prior year fund balance as a revenue source. I mentioned that it's not a sustainable model, and I'm going to definitely talk about this more in this presentation. But you don't want to keep using fund balance routinely. It's okay to use a little bit. We usually generally budget $200,000 to $300,000, but it's not a good idea to just use it as a main revenue stream or even a large revenue stream. It's supposed to just cover the gap of expenditures and revenues at the end of the year. And I know Lisa Hancock's on the call, our finance director, and we can talk more in depth if the council wishes later about fund balance, but I do have some more slides dedicated to that. So I just wanted to kind of go over this a little bit quicker. This is the original model that was proposed back the 2021 fiscal year with the asterisk there. These are what I had put forward back in March. On the expenditure side, we were expecting the town to go up about 2.7%, and I'll obviously talk about what those drivers were because that seems like a large number. The Board of Ed was going to go up 1.54, and overall, when you blend the two, it's 1.88. That was going to be that was going to be the expenditure increase, which, as you see from the bottom, comes out to about a 1.86% mill rate increase. That's what that 0.67 corresponds to percentage-wise. It was a 1.86% mill rate increase. Also in this model on the revenue side, which is the top of the chart, they talk about the aid that we were expecting to be getting from grants and then also investment income. You could see from 1920 to 2021, we were actually anticipating a $150,000 increase in investment income originally, as well as some other slight increases in permits and fees, building fees, pulling permits for projects and things like that. And then also you see the education grants. Well, we had explained back in March, and I know it's been a while, or February when I was presenting, but it shows as an increase on the education grants. It's based on how we budgeted year over year for ECS funding. Back in 18-19, as you can see, there's a trending from 16-17, 17-18, 18-19. Education grant revenue steadily declines from 10.7 million down to 9.7. And we expected that it was going to be 8.8 in 1920 due to some notice we had received that they were going to be adjusting the model for ECS funding for municipalities. As it turned out, they ended up not going all the way down to 8.8. They went to about 9.4. So while we expected to go down to 8.8, it only went down to 9.4. So we ended up getting a bit of a windfall. We did better than we thought we were going to do with grants, which actually ends up helping us this year because we had more revenue last year than we had expected from state aid. On the expenditure side, I covered this, but town departments account for about 2.7% change. Board of Ed was 1.54. Capital expenditures was going to go up 75 grand, which is about 62%. A lot of that we talked about during the capital project public hearing. There's projects in there that are mandatory that we have to do, such as the Vernon sewer treatment plant that is coming online for the first time this year. And we needed to basically start talking about increasing the capital expenditure budget for going forward to honor the debt obligations we have for that project, as well as some other projects that were due at this time. And then debt service was going up $50,000, was just over 1% total debt increase. The expenditure drivers on the town side, health insurance this year was going up a whopping $101,000. This was, again, the original pre-COVID model. So $101,000 alone of the town's $327,000 was due to health insurance. Another $41,000 of that was FICA, Medicare, and OPEB. So 150 alone is because of those obligations. There's really not much we could have done about that. There's salary increases of $51,000 that were built in, and some other projects that we routinely do. I know we had to budget for fuel increase. We are also on the third of 4 years for the recreation utility, $9,000 that we pay to offset the utility cost of the recreation building. And there is some $10,000 budgeted in for public safety volunteer physicals and multi-agency communications. So, on the next slide here, there's two other things. We had also budgeted one new thing that we asked for this year that, not sure where it's going to end up shaking out and when I do my presentation in 2 weeks, but I'm hopeful that we can still have an additional public safety officer as part of our budget. That position would be starting in April of 2021, which would only be about a $14,800 impact to the overall budget for next year. But obviously that's an obligation. If we hire somebody April of 2021, we truly are, we're going to be baking that in as part of our budget forevermore. So we should be ready in 2 years from now to pay that person's full salary. And the way we offset that was by not hiring a full-time town engineer. We are doing, we have a contract with a town engineer, which is very favorable, and it seems to be working well. So again, this is all pre-COVID, and I think we're just about to get into what the new stuff is here. So originally our mill rate was going to be 36.72, which was increase of 0.67 mils. Which was 1.86%, as I referred to earlier, which I think in most years would be pretty close, if to a mill rate that would be appetizing to the council and to the voters of the town. But now that we're faced with COVID-19, and staff and myself have been tasked with considering what a no mill rate increase would look like. This is now where I would like to talk a little bit about what the new plan is for the next fiscal year. So as I mentioned, the plan is to go down from that 1.86% to 0%. And the first thing I did and will do, and I'm kind of talking in the past here, but I'm already working on these things, but to determine what revenues will be impacted in the coming fiscal year that are no longer accurate because of COVID-19. And to true up the budget by editing those. So if you remember back on a couple of slides ago, we talked about the revenue sources for the town being property taxes, state aid, investment income, things of that nature. COVID-19 is likely to have an impact on all of those things. And when you budget, you have to sort of make some assumptions and make some guesses about where we're going to be and where things are going to come in the next year. So my job now is to true up the revenues, consider all of the the revenue sources and the streams, and try to do some balancing and offsetting to make sure that we don't ever have fewer revenues than we do expenditure. We don't want to under budget or over budget by too much if we can help it. And then we also want to use that number and close the gap. And I'm going to be referring to the gap throughout the next couple of slides. So the gap is the number that we need to cover to have a 0 mill rate increase. So my plan is to use a little bit more fund balance than we normally do to help close the gap. We cannot go all the way with it because, and I'm going to talk about why that becomes problematic, and I've already sort of alluded to it a bit, but whatever that number might be, just to completely use fund balance to cover it, I don't believe is the right strategy, and I'll definitely talk more about that in a moment. What I do want to share is that I've been very cooperative and very collaborative with the school superintendent. Walt and I have talked not only just EOC daily, but on budget and Birch Grove and all sorts of things. So he and I have a very good working relationship. And in a cooperative manner, we discussed that the remaining gap can be closed by reducing our operating budgets by our relative expenditure percentages. That's just a fancy way of saying, back a couple of slides ago, we talked about how much the town accounts for, the 12,453,303 number, and the Board of Ed accounts for 40,590,408. And we took that as a percentage of each other, and we figured out that 77% is the board and 23% is the town. So in this example I'm about to share, which is a ballpark example, but the numbers aren't too far off from the actual numbers, I'm going to just sort of lay out what that means. The revenue gap we would need to close to get to a no mill rate increase is $1 million. But this is an example. This isn't the exact numbers, but let's say it's $1 million. Well, we already planned on using $300,000 in my original model that I submitted in March. I'm going to propose in this example using an additional $300,000 of fund balance, which would be a total of $600,000. So that brings our gap number down from $1 million to $700,000. It's just using another $300K. So 77% of that reduction would come from the Board of Ed, and 23% of that would come from the town, which in broad dollars, broadly speaking, is about $539,000 from the Board of Ed and $161,000 from the town. How the heck are we going to absorb that? That's the question. So I think there's multiple strategies that we're going to employ. I've already done this. Department heads will have proposed reducing expenditures in their line items. They've taken a look at everything that is expected that is going to be impacted by COVID. They've proposed to me, for example, travel, conferences, various things that include face-to-face interactions. There may be some programs that are going to be canceled on a one-time year basis. I hate to throw anything out there because I don't want people to be upset, but there may be some programs that we have to consider are not going to happen in the future or in some different way than we're used to because of social distancing and things like that. Also, I'd like to just share that I believe in project postponement over complete delay or cancel or cutting. So if there's projects that can be postponed or funded a different way, I would rather do it that way as long as it's done in a way that's still fiscally responsible. And one of the ways that I wanted to just share is that third bullet, because so many of our beloved assets have been closed for a few months, we've actually had some operational savings that I guess people can probably understand that. So on a one-time basis, I've been considering where it's possible and able to do so to purchase some non-recurring goods and materials out of this year's budget savings, which can then be eliminated from next year's budget. This works best with one-time capital articles because they are truly one-time or once every 10, 20 years. They don't come back every year. So those are the type of things that I'll be proposing to you in 2 weeks about specifically how we can get to that to zero on the town side. On the Board of Ed side, I have to be honest that the council, once we adopt the budget, the Board of Ed is responsible for determining how to utilize their budget. The council, it's not in your purview that you can tell the board how to, what they can do to get their budget to 0 mill rate. However, again, I just want to mention the town manager and the superintendent have continued to have continued discussions on not just Board of Ed capital projects, but on all things. So, that's a good thing. We have an open line of communication between Walt and I. So this slide about why use of fund balance has to be kept minimal. I guess forgive me, my slide maybe, I have some other wording I'd like to use. So why utilization of fund balance for fiscal year 21 should be kept minimal? Well, the first thing is cash flow issues. That's something the fund balance is used to kind of, it's a storage account that, we pay things out of, we get paid, and they get deposited to the fund balance. And with the recent local tax deferral program that the town adopted that was driven by the state, we have deferred property tax collection for people who are affected by COVID for 90 days. And that's been mentioned a few times. And also on the website, we've blasted that out a few times. So if people do take advantage of this program, which we hope they do, if you are truly affected by COVID, please apply for it. But that does yield the town some cash flow issues, because we're going to be intaking less cash in July and August, and we won't be getting that money until October, sometime in October. So, we have to pay bills, we have to pay payroll, we have to pay utilities, we have to pay contracts. So the money's got to come from somewhere. So we're using the fund balance as a way that we can make sure the town keeps running smoothly, even without some cash flow that was unexpected. Now, again, we're not forgiving the debt; it's just being delayed. So we do expect to be paid tax revenue on the back end, but just it's a way for us to kind of keep it keep the town running and smoothly. Under uncertainty with COVID-19's impact on future state aid. So I think that it could present a need to utilize additional fund balance in fiscal year 22 to an even greater extent. We don't know what's going to happen with state aid, and I don't want to be a doomsday person here, but I don't know for sure, based on conversations I've had and heard, that if the state's budget is in flux right now, they may look at all places where they can cut expenditures. One of those is potentially the municipalities that they aid. So as of now, I do plan on moving forward with the ECS number and the other state aid numbers as presented originally. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be our final numbers. And I don't know exactly when that will be decided, but I've had conversations with an advisor to the governor about that. And I do participate on the municipal calls. So I'm hoping, I've raised this exact point about ECS funding specifically because it is such a large percentage of our revenue that we do need to know about what's going to happen. If for whatever reason our aid comes in light and we are in the mid-budget year, we only have a couple of things we could potentially do. One of them would be to potentially use more fund balance. Another would be to have a spending freeze. So I'm a little bit hesitant with state aid, but as of now, we're moving forward with the prescribed number. Starting the fiscal year 22 budget process, which is the next year's budget process, having reduced property tax revenue in fiscal year 21, could require even a greater need to utilize the fund balance or require an unusually higher increase. So basically, that's, I mentioned about starting next year in a whole. If we do use more fund balance this year, and like I said, we are planning on using, at least I am planning on proposing $300,000 more use of fund balance than we normally do. Eventually, that model, we need to make that back, either by decreasing expenditures by $600,000 or by increasing taxes to meet us. And again, we're in this position because we're trying to get to a zero mill rate increase because of COVID-19. Everyone that I know of is operating under the assumption that someday this COVID-19 will end, and might be next year. Who knows? We don't know. But at that point, we are going to want to get back to normal life again. And to do that, we're going to have to have, we have to either look at decreasing expenditures or increasing taxes to get back to the level of services that we're used to. But in this year, to get through this budget year, we're increasing the potential use of fund balance. And utilization of fund balance, which is a non-recurring revenue, to balance recurring operating budget expenses is not a recommended practice, best practice. The last bullet here is about our AAA bond rating. So a healthy fund balance will ensure that the town maintains its AAA bond rating, allowing the town to continue to secure low interest costs for debt issues in the future. That's a good thing. Obviously, it took a long time for the town to get to the level of a AAA bond rating. It's a very prestigious club to be in, but it's not just about the bond rating. It's about what that means for us. We're seen as a stable community. We're seen as a steady investor opportunity. People will want to come to us for our bond notes that we're going to be putting out for the Birch Grove School or for the fire station or whatever else. And, Lisa Hancock, our finance director, is very well versed in this, working with our bond attorney. But it's a very important thing that we do keep our AAA bond rating. And I know the previous manager worked very hard to get us to that, and I certainly would not want to jeopardize that. So in summary, one-time revenues should typically pay for one-time expenses. Recurring revenues should typically pay for recurring expenses. This is a year where we have to be creative and flexible for the entire town. I do believe that. And I think using an excessive amount of fund balance to offset the gap would be detrimental to our solvency. But I think thoughtful usage is what will help maintain the services and supports that we've come to expect from Tolland. And lastly, this is the most uncharted waters we've ever been in. I think everyone can agree with that. I don't believe now is the time to deplete the town's savings. So I know earlier this evening we had a question about the rest of the budget process and the referendum. Executive Order 7HH from the governor very clearly requires that the town adopt a budget for fiscal year 2021 by June 30th, which is not that far off at this point. And it's explicitly suspends any referendums. We are still advised to follow our normal procedures. We checked in with our town attorney about this. So I do anticipate still having a town manager's recommended budget public hearing. I recommend that we still have a budget presentation on the council set budget. And then the council would set the adopted mill rate. And again, we can't stress enough the importance of having an adopted budget going into the beginning of the next fiscal year. Not only is it law, I mean, at this point, the way the governor's executive order reads, but even in a year where we're not operating under an executive order, if we went into the new fiscal year without having an adopted budget, I know there's severe impacts to hiring practices and stability. And we did it in 2017. I wasn't here, but I've heard stories about it. And it just was not a good thing to push out an adoption of the budget for too long into the new fiscal year. And here's just a little handy calendar for people to see what the remaining steps are. So next meeting on the 26th, I'm going to submit to you my full and final recommended budget. The town council will have a public hearing on June 2nd, which gives us enough time to properly post it and get it published in the JI and everything. So Olivia, I know you're listening, so make sure you help us with that, get it in the JI. June 8th, the town council votes to finalize the budget for presentation. June 17th, we have the annual budget presentation, which would be done via Zoom. And June 25th, the town council would adopt the budget and set the mill rate for fiscal year 2021. So that's the remaining steps. We get in before the end of the year, and that's all I have. That's my presentation. I'm not sure if, Madam Chair, if you'd like to go into questions.
Yeah,
fire
thank you,
away.
Mike. That was a good presentation, a lot of steps, a lot of upcoming meetings to decide things. I had a couple of things I had written down. So regarding the fund usage, I'm just going to do a recap on a couple of things and then a question. So annual usage of the fund is an estimate. If the town is able to save money throughout the year in any fashion, then the use of the fund, if all revenues were to stay the same, is not as much as anticipated because they've saved in expenses. So savings can change the expected fund usage. And then if we receive more in revenues, such as motor vehicle supplemental taxes or anything like that, then that can also change the anticipated fund usage. Because again, like you had mentioned, it's just closing that gap. So if we receive more or less in grant dollars, that will have an effect on what we have to use from the fund. And all of that is really built into the budget based on assumptions. The actuals may reflect differently, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then from the trend sheet that you had, so we've seen an increase in property taxes and the other category, which includes the usage of the fund, while we've seen state grants going down significantly. So the tax burden is falling to increases in the mill rate or increases in usage of the fund, correct?
I believe that's correct. Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize what you're saying. But yes, as state aid is reallocated out of Tolland, we need the residents and the business owners to make up that gap on the mill rate. Yeah, it's not a direct one-to-one. We'd have to
Right.
I'd have to talk to Lisa about that. But yes, in theory, yes.
Okay. And then in investment income, can you talk a little bit about what drives that income and how the current events may have an impact on our investment assumptions that were in the original budget?
Sure. It's funny. Lisa and I just talked about this today, but I see, Lisa, would you like to take that?
Great minds.
It's up to you. If you want me to take it, I will.
Well, you want to talk about the CDs, and you can talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, by state statute, the regular general operating money can only be invested in certain type of investment instruments. Some would be certificates of deposit, money markets, the state treasurer's investment fund. But you really can't invest it like in stocks and bonds and things like that unless it's more like a trust type fund arrangement. So what we're seeing, what we're concerned about right now with investment income is that, first of all, if we do have a lesser cash flow, if there's some people not having the ability to pay their taxes, or if they defer them, that'll be less cash that comes into our accounts that can be invested in the first 6 months of the year. So that's, one concern that we have right now. Also, investment rates, we're just kind of watching them. They had gone down a little bit last month. Now they seem to be bouncing back a little bit, but not to an extent where I'm, getting real excited yet. So those are, some of the things that are impacting investment income.
Okay, so part of that is the cash that we have on hand, and if we are using it, then we can't get investment income on it. So that's part of our problem. And then you had mentioned, Mike, how important it is not to use the fund to plug the entire budget ask of the 1.1 million. And that gets back to investment income, the tax deferral program, potential cash flow issues. And just to point out that as of this week's unemployment records, we're well over 1,000 unemployment claims from the onset of the virus for the town of Tolland. The bonding, and as you mentioned in a phone call that we had with the governor's advisor, we talked about ECS and we talked about the other state grants, and the expectation is that state grants may not be there as the state faces a massive hole in their budget of 1.3 billion just for the next 2 months, and then an additional 3+ billion each year for the next 2 years. So as he put it to us, it was quote unquote, everything is on the table. I think it's wise at this point to just stick with putting in what we have for assumptions and then kind of seeing how that plays out. But how long do you estimate that it will take us to, if we were to go up to 600,000 in the fund, how long will it take us to reduce that usage of the fund to essentially get the tax rate up to pay for the expenses that we're borrowing from the fund for in a go forward basis?
So I can take a stab at that. So I think just a couple of things to be careful of. One is, like I said, this is certainly one of the most uncharted situations we've ever been in. And so we're kind of, we're all learning as we're going along with this. The second is the 1.1 million number you quoted. I mean, that was just an example. It was actually in my example, it was $1 million, but we will have the actual number for you. It's not far off from $1 million, but it's not exactly $1 million. It's a little bit lower. So Lisa, maybe you can help me with the thing about padding it and easing it over time. I know I can tell you my goal or my thought here is if we use 600,000 this year, next year's, I would probably want to bring that down to about 450. And then the next year back to 3, so that it kind of tiers it down back to 300, so that we don't get over reliant on fund balance over the long term. I think in my next meeting presentation to you, I'm going to try to show what fund balance will look like over a couple of years. Obviously 450 is just throwing that out there right now because it's halfway between 6 and 3. But the idea is that we would be able to make up the other 150 through other things such as savings, such attrition, salary savings. If there's other programs that might not be happening because of COVID, at that point, a year from now, these are the things that we would sort of build into our model so that it would be smoothed out over a couple of years. I don't think we can go right from 6 to 3. I think we need to have at least 1, maybe 2 years where we scale it down. And maybe Lisa, you can chime in on that.
Yeah, I think it's all going to depend also on where we end this fiscal year with savings on Board of Ed side, town side. I'm currently working on trying to see where we're at with the town side, because some of the estimates that I put together back in January for you now are changing based on things that have happened with COVID and income sources that are not coming in now. So I think the turn back is going to play a role in what happens with the future use of fund balance. So, for example, if we do have a significant turn back of revenue this year, then the hit to fund balance may not be as bad by taking 600,000 out next year. And then you would have to look, as Mike said, phase in over the next couple of years, looking at a reasonable use of fund balance to try to phase in the balance between other revenue losses for ECS and the mill rate increase to eventually try to make that up and not deplete your fund balance.
Right. As usual, we're trying to predict this before the state commits to anything. I know they're having a special session in June to address the budget issues, but our budget will be done before their budget is done. And they did not protect ECS in this last budget like that 1 year that they did, so they can cut us mid-cycle if they choose to use that as their leverage. So, we're at the whim of what they do.
Yeah.
And that's why you want to have the flexibility of having a not depleted fund balance in case we do have to cover anything that's unanticipated mid-year.
Yeah. Okay, Steve?
All right, Steve Jones, through you, Madam Chair, to Mike Rosen. Have we had any applications yet for the deferral?
Yes.
And
Lisa's showing. Sorry, Lisa, 4 or 5? 4 or 5.
And what's the deadline for that?
July 1st.
Okay. And does the tax deferment also include motor vehicle taxes, or is it purely only your physical home as a property?
I think it was all
taxes.
Yeah, it was all price, utilities, water, sewer as well.
Okay. Thank you. I think that does it for me for now. I had another question that just escaped me, so I'll get back to that when I remember. Thank you.
Throw your hand back up. Brenda?
Brenda Felucci. Can you explain or touch a little bit on the expenses we've had so far that we know of for the COVID-19 and what we expect for FEMA reimbursement? From my understanding, it might not be immediate and it might not be as much as we expect because this is a national emergency and not just localized. And I know this might be an ongoing conversation rather than just a quick answer right now.
Mm-hmm. Mike Rosen, Town Manager. Thank you, Brenda. That was a good question. We've been paying the COVID expenses out of that emergency declaration fund that Council authorized a couple of weeks ago. Feels like forever ago, but it was probably just a few weeks ago. I don't have, and maybe Lisa might have it. I know we did submit to the state a spreadsheet, a balance sheet of all the expenses we have accounted for up to this point, and then everything that we were projecting out to the end of the fiscal year, July 1st. So they wanted to know, do you remember, Lisa, where that shook out, where that was? I noticed.
I'm trying to remember the numbers because we coordinated.
I can try to look on my computer, see if I can pull it.
If that's something that
40,000 at that point. Some of the numbers included salary, like for me, which certainly you're paying me anyway, but because I'm working in the EOC, some of those may possibly count towards our 25% share. We haven't heard for sure if it's going to be, unless things have changed. a 75-25 split. We're still waiting to hear what FEMA is going to do. But normally it's a 75% paid by FEMA, 25% by the town, but it's for what they consider eligible costs. So we're not sure if everything that we've had to spend money on are all eligible costs, but hopefully they will be.
Yes, and we've built in not just we've had the deep cleanings that we've done for some of the buildings. We've done the Zoom licenses. We had to procure some computers and devices, phones for people to work from home. So we've been charging all of that to that account, in anticipation that we will get some reimbursement in the future. I just try. If you want, I'm going to keep looking and see if I can find the number for you.
Yeah, you can send it to us.
Yeah, maybe that's something.
I'll sign on to the town network. I'll get it for you. Hold on.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm talking and I'll.
Yeah, and I don't need the answer right now. Maybe that's something that you can add to a future presentation, because I know we're doing high level. A couple more questions. Can you touch a little bit on any kind of savings we might have because we're not using like the pond, Crandall's not being used. Do we have any insurance savings? We're not using a lot of the fields. I didn't think so, but I figured I'd ask. No. I see Lisa shaking her head.
No.
And, I know you talked about fuel cost savings. Last meeting, I asked if there was anything we can do for future planning to take a look at since oil is so low right now. Can we extend the contract that we have in place right now to, obtain a lower fuel cost than we've historically had?
You're predicting the future because at the next council meeting, I'm going to propose that we do try to lock in fuel or heating oil and gas, but not diesel because diesel is still very variable at this point with whether or not buses will be running. So yes, to that question. And then there will be, as you'll see into my presentation next time, there will be some fuel savings in this year based on reduced diesel rate. So good call.
Okay. And
I have those numbers if you want them.
Oh, you
Please.
got.
Yeah. Okay. With the Board of Education, total spent so far is about $93,480. Of that, $45,608 was the Board of Education belonging to them. And these are, like I said, includes payroll for myself, things like that is factored in. So the payroll for myself did not come out of the declaration fund, but it's an expense that we're going to put forward to FEMA to try to see if we can get it reimbursed for my services, for Mike's services, for anyone who's on the EOC team. So those are the numbers that I have.
Thank you, Lisa.
That's so far.
You just brought, this is Brenda Flusy still. Lisa, I just brought up a thing. If we have volunteers that are members of like the CERT team that are making masks and giving to the town for the town employees to use, should we be tracking those hours?
Yes. And John Lytell would probably be the better person, but he's probably got.
Yeah, he's
right. So I owe you guys a spreadsheet then, basically.
I think it would be helpful, and I could send you the form that should be completed. There's a special form there's two forms. It's what's called an ICS 214, which gives you you jot down little notes of what you're doing. And then there's the force account labor record, and there may be a different one for volunteers, but I'll find out from John. In the meantime, you could fill that one out and we could figure it out.
So, all right, thank you. I very much appreciate all you guys are doing. I understand this is going to be really hard, especially trying to predict what the future is going to be. We've seen already that we don't know what school's going to look like in September, so it's extremely hard to be able to anticipate those costs and those impacts. So good luck.
Thank you. Brenda? Not Brenda, Kurt?
Thank you. So a quick question, Mike, in your presentation, you talked about operational savings. Do you have any idea what that number looks like as of right now? I mean, I know we still have time to go. But.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a ballpark number out at you. It's probably so operational savings, what that means to me, I believe, would be those things that are recurring that are not going to occur because of COVID. And that number looks about $50,000, $55,000. Because it's one-time cuts that will have to be built back into the budget in the future if we want to continue doing those things.
Sam, and so you said that you're going to be spending some of that money, hopefully, on non-reoccurring expenses for next year. What did that look? What things are we talking about?
Yeah. So the idea would be to take a look. I'm going to just throw out the capital plan as an example because generally those are one-time things. Okay. So on the town side capital, I can point to 3 projects that total about $39,000. Permit software for planning, fuel tanks for the jail museum, and the ADA pathway that was over by Cross Farms, I believe. Or no, TIS. I forget what I'm sorry. Yeah. So those 3 projects could be paid out of this year's savings and delete them from next year's budget. The projects will still be done with this year's savings, and we can remove that $39,100, $39,000 out of next year. The Board of Ed has 2 projects that and Walt and I have talked about that they can also do that same math metrics with. Mm-hmm. And they can get about $45,000 doing it that way. But that's just capital. There's maybe other little things here and there, but that's just capital.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if I could just interject on the current year savings, I'm still working with department heads to get a feel for where we're at. So don't take Mike's number cast in stone because we're still working together to figure out, things that we're going to have to pay for and get it. So I'm hoping to have something soon for you, and we can try to go with some analyses, like Mike said, trying to show the impact on fund balance based on what we might have left this year. I also have to work with the Board of Education to see if they're going to have anything also, because that'll play a role in what gets carried forward to next year if there are any savings.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. That gets us to Lou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, just a few questions, for both Mike and Lisa. So we just heard from Katie about the issue regarding Birch Grove and about the possible overrun on the budget with that. I mean, we're going to try to do the best that we can to make sure that doesn't happen. But at the same time, that's something that is now could be a reality that we're looking at for next year as well. That you're saying that $600,000 for this year, and then you're looking to try and cut that down to $450,000 out of the fund balance next year, correct?
Ideally, yes, ideally.
But that's not but that's anticipating that we don't have any other additional costs, that we don't run into any additional, that we're still not in the COVID crisis or having to deal with issues on that, or a storm or something else like that may come up. So, so that's anticipating that things stay flat as they are. We don't have any major issues that we have to deal with that we're looking at for next year. Am I accurate on that?
Yeah, if there's no, the thing here is if it's a surprise to the general fund, then that's where it to me, it makes the biggest impact. If it's something like, I don't know how far off we potentially are with Birch Grove, but if it's an amount that we would have to bond for, then it wouldn't be an immediate impact to the general fund, except for on the debt service. So I don't even want to throw out a number because I don't know where we're at, but even if it's $100,000, whatever, then that would probably be something that gets bonded. We'd still maybe, depending on where we're at in the world at that point, but we may still be able to go from 600 to 450 and, be able to absorb the impact of that $100,000 on the bonding side.
Okay. And then second question is, you were talking about that if we run into an issue next year, that you'd be looking at savings. And you also mentioned that there's a possibility of looking at wages or personnel costs as part of the offset on that. I'm sorry. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong on hearing that.
When in my presentation, I said that wages are one of the budget drivers. In the model that I presented to you tonight, with the example I presented to you tonight, I didn't give you any specifics because I still have another week or so to put together the best budget possible. I know in here where I think we're going to be. I can tell you, it's a matter of public record that we have reached out to the unions on the town side to ask them about concessions with wage increases. We did get a response that they were hesitant to do that. So I need to see if we need to continue that conversation based on where we are with our gap number. There is a possibility that we may be able to fulfill the council's no mill rate goal without doing a wage freeze.
Okay. And so that was, so you had already reached out to the town employees on the possible concessions?
Yes.
And I don't know if Dr. Willett's still on or not, but has that issue been broached by Dr. Willett or by the Board of Education as far as possible concessions? It's just a yes or no. I don't know if it has been or not, because if it comes down to it, where we're looking, since wages are a major driver on this, that we're either looking at, possible concessions, or if not, possible layoffs.
Madam Chair, do you want Dr. Willett to? He's available.
Is he on still? Is he on? I don't think he's.
Yes. Yeah, he's waving. Yeah.
Oh, is he? Oh, who's waving? How do I see a wave?
Yeah.
I don't see him, but if you see him, yeah, if he wants to answer. I don't.
I'm virtually invisible.
You're a ghost to me.
No pun intended, or pun intended. It's simply that the Board of Ed has talked about it, but no formal request has been made.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lou. John, you're next.
Thank you. Mike, in response to Kurt's question, you mentioned that there's some savings that you'll see that can cover some expenses that in next year's budget, right?
Yes.
In your presentation, you mentioned that there may be some cost savings in projects that can be postponed.
Yes.
Is that the same thing, or are there additional projects that you're looking at that may be postponed?
I think at this time where I'm at with the numbers, I've been able to find projects that can be used in this year with this year's money to end of year money to buy. I have not identified any postponed projects at the moment. Mostly the ones that would be postponed, I believe, would be the capital plan projects. I am confident that I'm going to be able to give you a budget in 2 weeks that I think is the best budget I can give you, but also that I think may be able to not have to postpone stuff. I think that we could get by with the savings we have this year because of COVID and being able to do what we need to do and without postponing. But I am looking at that as an option rather than just straight cutting something.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Steve, your hand's back up. Did you remember your question?
Yeah, yes, I did. Steve Jones, Town Council. I remember my question, and now I actually have probably at least one or two more. The first was what would be the percentage of the fund balance that would remain from the usage? I know that we're supposed to hit kind of a target that's either ideal or required for that balance.
Right. The unassigned fund balance is the number that we want to be talking about. I think here it's currently it's about 8.1 million. We don't, maybe Lisa, you can back me up on this, but obviously we're going to be projecting out where the fund balance is going to be at the end of the year. I know the Board of Ed has had some meetings when we have a joint meeting next week about maybe where they're going to end the year with turnbacks, and that would obviously add to our fund balance, which would relieve the pressure of having an increased fund balance usage year. I also, one thing to throw out there is we haven't decided the fire truck, whether it's capital or bonded or cash. So that's something that the council never had an opportunity to finalize. So understanding that that's still up in the air, the budget I'm going to be presenting to you next meeting will still have it as its original funding source, which is bonded. Taking it out of cash would be $750,000 subtracted from 8.1 million.
Okay, and then the second question was going to be in regards to the debt service. Obviously, Birch Grove is coming on as a big project. Are there any projects that are currently in the process of coming off or almost off the books in terms of like geothermal or the library project? I'm trying to think if there's any others that were recently on a referendum that were kind of higher dollar amount.
Yeah, Lisa, do you have, I know you have the debt schedule.
Yeah, in the, I don't have the debt schedule handy. I wish I had known.
No worries.
But the way we structure our debt management plan, and before Birch Grove came along, we were doing phenomenal. But what we do is we structure the issuance in a way so that as debt falls off the books, the new debt will come on the books. And that's how we were able to try to keep our budget stable all these past few years. You'll notice it's been one rate. When Birch Grove hit us, that's where, unfortunately, we could not absorb the debt right now. So I don't know specifically which projects are coming off. It is built into the debt management plan that I have in your budget book, which is obviously going to change depending on where we go with some of this stuff. But it'll show current debt and it'll show the amount as it changes each year on one of the pages in the book.
And
Does
then
that help?
Yeah, that does help. And then I assume I think know the answer to this. The current 5-year road improvement plan is not impacted by any of this. It's already been bonded and approved for referendum, so there's no real impact to that schedule.
Well, Lisa, do you have? I have one thing to say about that. You want to go first?
Yeah. The bonding authorization is in place. We only issue about we do about $1 million a year in road work for the projects, and that is the amount of debt that we issue each year is offset by what we get for town aid road and LoCIP funds, and then it's spread it out a little bit more than 5 years so that we could get $1 million done each year. So that's still going and it's still in the plan.
Yep. And the only thing I want.
Sorry.
No, sorry. You definitely took the words out of my mouth. The other thing I was going to mention is that we did receive the town aid roads and the local CIP grants for last fiscal year. We are obviously anticipating receiving those again next year, but since they are state aid, as we talked about, they might be variable. So we overall, we put $1 million a year into road improvements, but a certain percentage of that is state grants. So if we should not receive the same level or the grant at all, we would not be able to go do as many roads as we do each year.
Okay, and then I guess just one more question. It's probably one that can't be fully realized right now, but due to less travel on the roadways and also just less impacts to the day-to-day projects that Public Works is doing, has there either been any savings in that aspect, or perhaps they've been able to do more because of that? In terms of just like being able to get more work done more efficiently, I guess is the question.
That's a good question. I know Scott was on our earlier call, but he didn't join us for this one. I'll certainly bring that back to him. I can tell you, I know that the crews are busy. They are out there working because construction is an essential business and they are wearing their PPE and everything, but they were doing some work around Town Hall earlier today. I can find out if there have been savings or if they've been able to do more projects with social distancing and less traffic. I don't know that off the top of my head, though. Okay, and sorry, I just have another one that just came to my mind. Were any of those savings realized, I think, in our prior conversation in regards to not hiring seasonal workers for certain positions? I can't remember if that was mentioned at the first discussion for the budget or if it was a different meeting. I think the only positions that we have not been employing are some of the recreation programs, and I don't know. I don't believe Bruce has finalized his summer plans yet with lifeguards and things like that, counselors. So I can't give you that answer. That would be on the recreation account anyway. It would be on the town. But in terms of the recreation programs such as yoga and Pilates and all those things, those folks that teach those classes have been furloughed or I think it's officially laid off, but they are the only ones in town that had that. So there are some savings there. There's also some attrition savings where there are positions that haven't been filled because of COVID and there's some vacancies. So we are realizing those savings in this year, and we are using those savings to do some of the projects we talked about.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's definitely something going forward. I know you talked about possibly canceling programs or certain items that might save money. And I think on the flip side, it might be worthwhile for our town to look into ways that we can kind of recoup lost revenues to see. I mean, I'm just thinking of, I think the recreation department hosts kind of a Facebook Live yoga session.
Yeah, they do.
And I'm wondering if it's in the future, it might be feasible to try and set up programs where either through Zoom accounts or other accounts, people could pay through the recreation to kind of have these exclusive programs or classes that are also still socially distant if needed. I mean, I guess it's one way just kind of to modernize programs that maybe can help fund certain recreation departments or other accounts.
Sure, Mike Rosenthal, manager. I imagine that's something we can certainly solicit feedback on. I just, as a point of something that I heard earlier today, the recreation director is putting out a survey about would people be interested in doing a modified summer camp that would be a less intense version of summer. I don't know how to best put it, but just not as outdoors and near each other. It's more crafts and things. So that's one way that we're going to understand what the market's changed now for people to have kids in camp. And then maybe also in the future, we can put a survey out about would people be interested in doing socially distant, programs. I know, like you said, yoga, I believe that teacher is volunteering her time to do the yoga classes. She's not being paid to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. John has another question.
Just one more question. I'm looking at Mike Executive Order 7HH, suspending our referendum, correct?
Yes.
And that's a done deal. There's nothing we can do about that. Is that right?
That executive order, I did have our legal counsel look at that. And I think it's pretty much, it's making its way through the industry right now. That order came out after our last meeting where we talked about, we would like to do a referendum. We'd like to do this and that. That order came out like 2 days after our meeting 2 weeks ago. And as the language reads in that, we cannot have a referendum indefinitely. It doesn't give an end date to it until the executive order is lifted, HH. Even in the top part of the order where it has all the whereases, whereas, one of the things says, whereas budgets have to be passed by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2020. So we cannot go past June 30th. We have to adopt our budget before June 30th. So I took that and worked my way back. And that's how I developed the budget calendar, with us finalizing our budget and mill rate on the 25th of June. It's going to be a very expedited June for us. We're going to have a lot of meetings.
Right. Okay. So how much does it typically cost the town to run a referendum?
I think I might have that. Hold on, let's see. I think I might actually have
5,000 to 7,000.
That sounds about right. Let me just check. Let's see. About 4,000, something like that. About 4. Okay. 4,000, give or take. Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Lisa. 32. Was that 32?
No, it's about 5,000 to 7,000, like Tammy said, because you have the poll workers, you have the ballots they have to buy, the absentee ballots, things like that.
Oh, okay. I was looking at that sheet that we have with all the numbers on it, but it looks like it was about 4,000. But maybe it's.
Yeah, no, that didn't include everything.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so every day that goes by, it seems less and less likely that there will be a referendum. Is that safe to say?
I don't foresee them lifting any of the executive orders. In fact, they just added their 40th executive order tonight, so I don't see them lifting it before July. Very likely, it'll extend into the summer. Unless anybody heard otherwise, I don't think they're going to be lifted until further notice.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I have Mike. I have a couple of things. I don't know that we necessarily can answer them now, but maybe for the next meeting. So in your scenario of the $1 million, yes.
Yeah, Sandra's trying to get a hold of you.
I was just wondering if I could ask a question. I haven't had a chance yet to ask.
Oh, you didn't raise your hand, honey. Can I raise your hand?
Oh, I thought it was just an order.
No,
I'm sorry.
at the bottom of the participation thing, there's a blue button that says raise your hand. So Cassandra, go
Pardon
ahead.
me.
No,
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was like, I'm getting skipped over. What's going on here? Okay, so that was my fault. So thanks, Tammy. So my question for Mike is, our unassigned fund balance is our investment income essentially, like that, is that the balance we use to build our investment from?
Lisa, yeah, can you answer that? Sorry.
It is part of it.
From?
It is part of it, but also tax collections
Okay.
that come in, other revenues, any idle cash, we invest it until it's absolutely needed. So it's the cash flow from fund balance helps us start the year when obviously you have to collect taxes. You don't usually get them till the end of July. So you have the cash flow from your fund balance to help you get through that first month of payrolls and the various bills that come in. So for the cash flow purpose, it's there, but then the tax revenue comes in, other revenue comes in, and that, but that is also invested.
Okay, but is that the largest portion though, is the unassigned fund balance for raising investment income?
At
I'm just
certain
saying,
times,
like sorry.
No. Certain times of the year could be when, we're first starting out the year, that would be the largest amount of cash on hand. But once we start collecting taxes, we have, 10 to 20 million in July, August, and 10 to 20 million in January. So, so that when those come in, that's where we get a lot more cash flow to try to invest it all out.
Okay, but it is part of it. Okay.
Yes.
And then, how many months operating expenses do we need to have on hand for the town? What is that? 1 month, 2 months, more months?
It's best practice 2.
I thought it was 2, right?
Yeah, the GFOA recommends at least 2 to 2.5 months. I know it's in our fund balance policy that's what we'd like to have, but we're nowhere near that with the balance that we have on hand now. 2.5 months would probably be close to, oh God, I don't want to say the wrong answer, $9 to $10 million, and we're nowhere near that.
Okay. All right. Those are the 2 questions I have. Thank you. Sorry about that, Tammy.
Oh, no, that's okay. So Mike, actually, Steve's hand's up again. Steve, you want to go ahead and go?
Sort of a question, or actually, more of a comment based on John's questions. I think one thing we have to be in mind, or keep in mind, going forward with elections outside of the referendum, is the potential costs that we may incur to safely hold elections. But also in tandem with that is, I know the Secretary of State is rolling out safe poll grants that municipalities can apply for to make polling places safer for, say, the primary in August or the November general election. So it might be good for us as a town to make sure our registrars are kind of actively going for some of those grants and ways to save the town money while simultaneously making voting safe for everyone. And that was just my comment in terms of budgeting out for our registrars and for our elections and our poll workers.
Thank you.
Okay. So Mike, your example of the $1 million and using the increased fund balance,
yes.
That doesn't get us down to a 0 expense increase. So what I want to know is, by using the fund and then doing the reductions that you propose, what is the built-in increase of recurring expense that's going to be to start the year off 1/1? And also, let's see. So basically what I'm saying is, if we are asking for $300,000 and we're only reducing by 160, then my assumption is that our budget increases by 140, and that's our immediate hole that we have to raise taxes by in the next year, on top of lowering the 600,000 to the 450,000. So it would be whatever is left in expense plus whatever we're using from the fund that we're going to reduce is our automatic budget hole going into the next year. I'd like to understand what those numbers are.
Mhm.
And so that's basically it. I want to understand what's going to be left from the budget hole, because by using the fund and not decreasing expenses, we're creating a hole.
I think we can get you that number. Also, let's just, for round numbers purposes, let's say it's $140,000, like your example said. That number, that 140, could be brought down not just by a tax increase in the future, but also by either savings or attrition or things like that that happen throughout the fiscal year. So, I mean, obviously, it's a large dollar amount. If it was like 10,000, it'd be a lot easier to absorb that than 140. But it's by some combination, we will get to the no mill rate increase. And Lisa, is that about right? I mean, we would strive to not have to go to the taxpayers to make that back, as long as if we have the means to do it internally.
Well, but my concern is it's not just the town side, it's also the Board of Ed side. So if they reduce $500,000, they still have 115,000 left on their side. You have 140 on your side. Now we're at 255. Plus another 150 down from the fund if we go from 600 to 450, and we're already at a $400,000 tax increase before we even open the books. So I'd like to understand those numbers to just see what the whole is to start with.
That's a fair question. I mean, we'll definitely have the real numbers next time. We'll let you know.
I know you don't have real numbers now, and I appreciate that. I just figured I'd throw it out there so you could be kind of thinking about it for the next go round.
Okay.
Now, I don't see anything from any other counselors at this point. So if anybody has any other questions relevant to Mike's presentation or anything, it'd probably be beneficial to get them over to him so he can consider all of that with the next go round. The next couple weeks are going to be kind of busy, crazy with all the budget stuff. So anything that you want him or Lisa to know, forward over. Okay, we're moving on. That gets us to number 9, old business. 9.1, discussion and feedback for the creation of a remote participation policy.
Okay, so this is under old business, and this is Mike Rosen speaking again. The old business is about the remote participation policy. So the last time we had this on the agenda, I think was probably back in March. I think the exact date's in here somewhere. But anyway, or maybe even February. The policy was going to basically be the rules that we were going to release to not just the council, but all of the town's boards and commissions that would allow people to remotely participate in meetings telephonically. I kind of hesitate to laugh right now because we've been mastering in that for the last 2 months at this point. With COVID, we've figured out the remote participation policy, but the only problem is that this is just how we can operate currently under these executive orders 7B. When that's repealed someday, we'll go back under the umbrella of FOIA, and as FOIA is written at the moment, these Zoom meetings I don't believe are going to be continuing unless the landscape has changed permanently, which that's yet to be determined. So I don't expect any decision to be made tonight by the council, because we would really need to wait until the executive orders are lifted and FOIA returns to normal for us to employ a policy, because it would be a real bad idea to put out a policy that would conflict with a current executive order. However, that being said, while things are a little bit more loose right now, it's a good idea to talk about what's been working and what's not been working. And the policy that I had given you back in March or February, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date, is that draft policy that's in your packet tonight. What we had done at that time is we had asked all the town's chairpeople and all the staff that liaison to those boards and committees to weigh in on the policy. And if you remember, this was a draft policy that I wrote. I lifted a lot of the language of this from a previous community that I worked for. So I tried to tailor it to Tolland and to FOIA. But there may be some things in here that aren't relevant or pertinent to Tolland specifically. And I believe that's what a lot of the feedback that you received revolves around. So if you look in your packet, starting on page 31 and going for a few pages to about 38, these are all these are all feedback that we got from either committee chairs or from staff liaisons that had some suggestions about how to tailor the policy. What I wanted for tonight for us all to talk about, and maybe it's getting a little bit late, but maybe we should at least have the discussion about what you would like as a council, what you would like to edit the policy incorporating these changes. And I'm hoping you had a chance over the weekend to digest some of these suggestions. So that's really where I wanted to frame this conversation. This is really your opportunity now to as a council to revise this policy so that it best fits your town, our town.
So look, we already have hands up. Kurt.
All right. So now everyone's been using Zoom and everything, and I think people are becoming pretty proficient in it. And once things do go back to normal, and the executive order is lifted, if say a board had the ability to not meet remotely, but a couple members, could they use a Zoom type meeting to have an interface, or does it have to be via the phone? And the FOIA regulations or rules. Do you know what I mean?
I think FOIA allows. I'd have to read it. Honestly, I'd have to read it again. I know for sure telephones are allowed. I don't know about video conferencing, although I don't imagine that they would. I don't know why there would be a problem with that. I don't know the answer to that, but I think what I do know, telephones are okay.
And secondly, I forgot what I was going to say, but yeah, that was my main question. So you don't, even if we could put like a laptop at Lou's seat, when he's gone, I don't know if that's allowed. That would be something I would like to see, because I think there's a lot of commissions and boards that struggle to get attendance or at least have people volunteer because they can't make the time commitment. So if we can have any way to ease this for future use, and I think, in the current situation, everyone's expertise now and doing long distance meetings, I think it'd be easier for us in the future.
I agree with you, Kurt. If it's possible to use Zoom, and we don't have to call it out by name, but just say remote software, we could put that in. We could say that as long as it's allowed by the Freedom of Information Act, I think we could do that. Just be aware too that we would have to pay to keep a Zoom license going in the future. So it's not a lot, but it's still a cost that we wouldn't have to incur. It would just, if it's just the telephone, then it would just be the telephone costs.
To kind of add on to that, Kurt, I don't know if it was you who was talking to me about it, but somebody was actually talking to me about similar to that, liking the idea that we have a lot more public participation in these calls having Zoom, know, and if that would be something worth considering going forward. I know our meetings are on CBC, but like I, for one, I don't have Comcast. I don't have the access to watch it if I wasn't in it, kind of a thing. So having these meetings like set up.
Remote participation. And I don't know once the executive order goes away, if that'll be allowed for even, maybe have a webcam, in the council chamber so people can view the meeting on via their laptop, which, I think is a way to get more participation in the town, versus if no one has TV anymore. So
I think we need to go back to take a look at FOIA and understand what's allowed. I'm trying to pull it up on my computer here, but I think the spirit of FOIA is that people do participate in person. Meetings are done in person and open to the public. But our landscape may have changed. And so it's something that we have to roll with the punches, and we'll see where this all goes in the future. That's why we're not asking for an action tonight. We're just asking for your ideas.
I agree. And I think it's something we should continue looking on as we go through this time.
So I think that, Mike, is something to take away, to find out if there's the ability to have a remote meeting like this, or what it looks like in the future. Is that you good, Kurt?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Brenda?
Hi, Brenda Flusy. I talked to Planning and Zoning about this policy. I gave them an update about it coming up. And they mentioned that there's a couple elected boards, commissions, whatever, that have alternates. And the reason why they have alternates in place is so that if a member of the board or commission is not available, then they can still seat and have a quorum. This policy can take away the responsibilities of a alternate from getting appointed. And it sort of, takes away the need of having an alternate in some cases. So that's something we might want to consider as we're moving forward, because it's going to change the landscape of a couple of our elected boards and commissions. It also, FOIA just may decide, they're probably finding out all the ins and outs and benefits and distractions about having meetings like this. So they may just end up coming out with some updates, at some point. If we are going to be doing video, I suggest that we come up with some sort of policy or etiquette on how we should be handling ourselves on video. It's a little bit different for many of us. We might not take into consideration some of the things that are going on or how distracting some things are going to be. And we may want to portray a professional, view, so to speak, of ourselves as a town. And it just might be something to consider to add in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Steve?
All right, Steve Jones, Town Council. If we were to establish, Mike, this policy, could we pass it to be effective after the executive order is lifted, if we want to move forward with that at any point?
The only hiccup I see there is if anything changes between when the executive orders are lifted and when FOIA might be amended to reflect that. So if we were to pre-pass a policy, it may become irrelevant immediately. That's my thought.
And that was my concern as well, is, if we passed it, but we made the effective date after an executive order, suddenly we saw a glaring error with the policy, would we be even able to go back in and change it, even though it's not effective, but it's been passed? So I guess from a parliamentary or procedural process, I think I agree that we shouldn't try and make this effective until the executive order has been lifted and kind of have that binding vote on passing a policy.
I agree. I think we should wait till after the executive orders to actually pass the final policy. We don't know what FOIA may look like at that point. They may be more relaxed than they currently are. But I think we should wait to actually formally pass this. It was just a good discussion point to have tonight to see if there was any feedback from the committees that we want to incorporate into the draft policy.
And for the Zoom license cost, what is that currently for the town, and how much does that cover?
I believe that we pay $150 a year to have the ability to have 100 participants on each Zoom call. John Lytell, I know he's off the call at this point. I have to give him credit. He had the foresight to start the conversation about Zoom. He brought it to my attention. He procured a Zoom license for the fire department. And I said, that's a great idea. I'd like to get one for the town. And then I think Heidi got one for planning. So the town has 3 licenses, and I believe the Board of Education has one as well. Each one of those accounts is $149 a year. Each one can support up to 100 people. And the reason we went with that plan is that the basic plan was only for 3 people on a meeting, which that's not very good for our purposes. Yeah. And the tier up from us, they want that you had to guarantee 15 paid licenses. It was an exorbitant amount of money. I think it was in the tens of thousands. So our $150 license seemed pretty good.
And is the current license, is that being taken into consideration for the town budget, or due to the executive orders and our current situation, is that coming out of our emergency fund at this time?
Correct. Declaration fund for right now. Yep.
And then I think I had, so yeah, you said there's 3 licenses. So, and I'm just trying to backtrack in terms of using Zoom as a potential option for remote participation. Does it allow for multiple meetings on certain nights? Like if, the Ag Commission and for whatever reason, planning and zoning had a meeting on the same night, would they be able to both use the Zoom account, or would we kind of have to play creatively with using the fire department's account and the Board of Ed's account so that they could each have their meeting on the same night and still utilize Zoom?
The latter, Steve. The latter. Yeah, that's why Heidi actually very intelligently got a license for the planning or land use boards, because we have our council meetings, we have Birch Grove, we have EDC, and that may conflict with what wetlands, conservation, planning. So sort of good idea to have multiple. And yes, we do have the fire departments as a backup as well.
Okay. So that's good. And I just wanted to thank Kurt for his question about kind of the audio functions of calling versus Zoom, because technically you can call into a Zoom call. So you could utilize Zoom as a software format and everyone just call in versus using video. But obviously with that logistical hurdle, I mean, you'd have to probably have a $150 account for several groups just to, meet potentially that demand in future budget years. So I could see how the policy may require us to lean more on people utilizing their cell phones. And I saw there's a concern about cell service in one of the comments on 5B. So that's something that I think we have to keep in mind once we get to a point where we can vote on a policy. Is, Tolland doesn't always have the best cell service depending on where you live and what carrier you have. So just things to keep in mind as a council.
And I think this is Mike again speaking. I think when COVID was first started becoming a hot button in March, we were trying to figure out, was there sort of a way, this was before Executive Order 7B came about. We were considering, can we have in-person meetings and then maybe have like Zoom for people that want to participate at home and do a combination approach. But we decided, I mean, obviously when the executive order passed, that was the final answer there. But for people that may not have a computer, for people who may have spotty cell phone service, can they actually still attend in person? But that was severely limited, that idea, when they gave us the 5-person maximum for social distancing, because I don't know of a meeting that between the board members and the staff and the recording secretary, that's 5 right there at least.
Yeah. And actually that brings up another point I was going to bring, just in terms of remote participation for the public, as was kind of brought up by one of the chair members as a concern or a question about the policy, is if we get to a point where we can return to being in the council chambers or other town rooms for business, but maybe we're still at a point where you can't have more than 10 people in a room or 20 people in a room. How do we accommodate residents that want to attend those meetings or participate and listen in, but might be forced out from being able to attend because of limited capacities or in certain rooms, like in the conference rooms or the chambers?
Yeah, it's a good. I don't believe the original policy. I'm trying to quickly scan for you, but it's 200 pages long. It's something that I don't know if it was going to be extended to the public participants, but maybe that'll change now. I think it was mainly just for the members of the board or the council or the committee, so that they could create that they wouldn't have quorum issues. I think this was generated first and foremost by quorum issues of boards that can't get enough physical bodies in a room to meet. So you have remote participation, so you can still have a meeting, so you're not holding up town business because people may not be able to attend in person. I think that's where this originally came up from.
Yeah, and so I wasn't trying to deviate too much from that. I think I was also trying to think of in terms of if it's a board that has to have members of the public present, like assessment and appeals, or if the Conservation Commission has a guest presenter or a group that's coming to talk about an issue, and then it suddenly reaches a capacity, would that allow flexibility to avoid maybe having that social, having that max not hit, if a member could voluntarily step away and become a remote participant in that meeting? So like if it's say 10 people can't be in a room and you have 11 planning to come, would a member be allowed to do that and utilize one of the reasons provided to participate remotely? Just a lot of logistics I'm just kind of thinking of right now. I'm trying not to extend the meeting too far out past 10 o'clock, I'm realizing, but I really appreciate the conversation and for everything you provided to us, Mike, and the feedback from the chairs.
And I definitely hope that maybe, if the council can take this feedback, maybe the next time we bring this on our agenda, everybody, maybe we can collaborate and send feedback through either myself or the chair, depending on how you want to do it. And we can maybe do a full final red line of everything. I mean, my thought is, there's a lot of good comments on these from the chart, and I'm happy to make the adjustments council would like me to make, for sure.
Okay, and actually, sorry, now that I just said it was past 10 o'clock, just a point of order, Madam Chair, do we need to have that motion that we're extending the meeting past 10 p.m.? Or is that a no at this point? Is that kind of?
We do not. Mike and I checked into that, and we do not have to do that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Kurt?
Just since we got kind of talking about the Zoom licensing and all that, when things go back, if things go back to normal, could you foresee a situation where the town staff would use remote meetings like this, webinar and stuff like that? If when everyone's back in the building, but I know you have DPWs out somewhere else, fire departments, not all at town hall. So is that something that you could see being used besides for town meetings?
Yeah, I certainly think that. So we get a lot of mileage out of the Zoom license. I'm Zooming you now from the master account of the town. We use this account to do our EOC meetings every day. We do department head meetings. We do development meetings. We do EDC, Birch Grove, council. So we get a lot of usage for $149 a month, or sorry, $149 a year.
I would love to see a count of our Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I think we're probably one of their all-time favorite customers. So honestly, I think this is great. If this is something that we want to build into the budget and, in the future, and maybe have a Zoom license that's recurring every year, as long as it makes sense to do so. Because you're right, there are plenty on the EOC calls. I've got our state trooper in his cruiser. I've got, DPW out, and maybe somebody's working from home and they're able to participate. So wherever you're not physically in the town hall, but where everyone's interacting, great. Everyone, we have awesome calls. So I think it's something that we may want to think about continuing, as long as it's cost effective and something that's favorable, or it's a good idea for us to keep having a Zoom license. But we also have to respect the social distancing measure. If if we can't have 10 people in a room together, then we really can't have department head meetings. So we still should do Zoom at that point.
I'm trying to think, beyond the social distancing time period, but who knows when that'll be. So great. So thank you.
Yeah.
So I went through and I read all the grid and everything, and I have quite a few questions or comments on that, but in essence of time, and the fact that we're going to put this on another schedule coming up, I think we should try to get it back on an agenda fairly soon, but would ask that everybody go out and read the policy again, read the feedback from the chairs. If you have any suggestions on any part of the policy that you'd like to see changed, I think we need to give Mike some time to follow back up from legal to see how Zoom or these types of meetings would be handled with the FOIA questions and that. Mike, I can just send you an email with my general feedback. And then when we get it back on the calendar, we can go over all of it.
Thank you. That would be great. And then if anybody had any other specific feedback about the chairs and the staff feedback, let me know about that. I'll try to iron out for the next meeting that this is on, a full version of everything redlined with what I think is like the majority of what people want to see in the policy. So happy to do that.
Then I am going to move us on to 9.2, consideration of a resolution to adopt an ordinance establishing a commission on people with disabilities and the setting of a public hearing thereon for May 26, 2020. So this again is just for us to set a public hearing to actually vote on establishing this committee.
Yep, that's right.
So this is again something that we talked about pre-COVID, and it was like on our regular schedule. to get it set and moving forward. And of course, everything got paused. So we're just picking up where we were before. So I would ask that everybody familiarize yourself with the policy as it was. And if you have any questions or anything, the public hearing is going to be set for the 26th once we vote on it there.
And the reason, and because we're establishing a new committee, it's an ordinance, so that's why it requires a public hearing. Unlike a policy, like the remote participation policy, which is simply a policy, doesn't need a public hearing. An ordinance to establish a new committee does require a public hearing.
Okay, does anybody have any questions regarding the public hearing part? Steve, your hand is up.
Oh, sorry, Steve Jones. It wasn't a question regarding the public hearing. It was just a question about when would be the effective date for the implementation of the committee. I'm just thinking about sort of the logistics of getting them together and trying to have meetings start, just the timeline of that.
Well,
that might be a question for the public hearing. So if that's not an appropriate time to ask, I can save that question for that point.
I think it's a good question. I think the thing that's going to really kind of circle around that is once we establish it, then we need to reach out to the public and see who wants to be on it and get information and go through the process of vetting them and picking who's going to actually be appointed. So I would assume that they're not going to actually be able to kick off and start for a little while. But Mike, is there anything?
I don't have a best guideline or best practice for this. I mean, you certainly can create a commission in the middle of all of this if you wanted to. You have that power. We do have a good draft mission statement for them. That's part of the resolution. I think maybe it's good to have the voice of that community to be part of COVID-19, so they can say maybe there's issues with using Zoom or whatever. So it might be good to have that voice as part of our considerations for how we do meetings. But I do absolutely agree that there's going to be challenges with interviewing candidates. We can't do it in person where we normally would, and that would be different this time if we were to establish this now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Steve Jones. Yeah, I appreciate that, and it was mostly just my concern of if we pass it, just are we saying when we pass it that it's immediately going to Bev or to a specific town staff member and saying, okay, go, or are we kind of giving them a timeline of, okay, here's the process and this is when we would expect to have the first meeting, just so that the general public, especially those who are very interested in wanting to serve, maybe don't have the expectation that once we pass it, it's going to kind of flick like a light switch that we're going to have meetings within a very short period of time. So you're just kind of having those reasonable expectations for members of the public that want to be a part of this commission, that, it's not that quick, I guess you could say.
Yeah, certainly. And this is Mike again speaking. The council appoints the members of the Commission on Disability, people with disabilities. So you also set their term dates. So if you, after going through the interview process of the candidates, picking the 7 that you think are the right fits for the 7 slots, talking with town staff if there's going to be a staff liaison and all that, giving them term limits and giving them, I think then we'd be ready to actually establish and say, okay, go. I think there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into it first. But certainly could be a few months from now. I mean, if you establish this in 2 weeks by public hearing and then by resolution, they're not going to be starting up probably for a few months, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time.
And I expect people to be reasonable. I just wanted to make sure that there was just kind of reasonable expectations in light of COVID, that you can get them involved as quickly as possible, but just understanding the limitations that we currently have in terms of establishing a new commission.
Okay, anybody else have anything? If not, then Steve.
All right, Steve Jones. So I'd entertain a motion that the following resolution be introduced and set down for public hearing on May 26, 2020 at 7 p.m. via Zoom remote meeting for the purposes of establishing the Tolland Commission on People with Disabilities.
This is Brenda Felucci, I second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor. Brenda?
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Cassandra,
Aye.
Kurt,
Aye.
Lou,
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
I'm an aye. I don't think I missed anybody. Lisa, that passes unanimously. So the public hearing will be set for our next meeting. Right, that gets us to 10, report of the town manager.
Hi, Mike Rosen, town manager. I did submit a written report for you all, and I might just leave it at that for now because my life has been budget and COVID and Birch Grove. So so that's pretty much. If you have any questions about the manager's report, though, all the department heads did a great job to submit their status updates. I asked them to keep it mainly to COVID-related status updates for the time being. So that's what you'll see in your packets tonight.
Mike, I'm going to apologize first because I didn't get a chance to finish reading through all of it before this meeting. So I do have some questions, but I'll just send them to you in essence of time.
Sure.
And that gives me time to finish the second half of it. But I did have some questions around increased usage of not only the food bank, but the renters program and the heat and all that. But I'll send them all to you so you can have them written down.
I would loop in the appropriate department head with that. Yep.
Yep. Does anybody have any questions for Mike on the manager's report? Okay, seeing nobody's hands raised, that gets us to 11, adoption of minutes. Steve?
Steve Jones, I would entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as laid out in 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3.
Move all set.
Okay, there you go. All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Brenda?
Aye.
Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, that passes unanimously. Correspondence to council?
Yes, I'm doing a little bit of a different format in respect to time. By the way, this is Brenda Falusi. If you guys want to give me feedback afterwards, I'd appreciate it. We received 31 emails as of 4 p.m. today over the past 2 weeks. What I'm going to be doing is listing the topics that were discussed in each email. Some of the emails had multiple topics, and let you know how many emails pertain to each of those topics. So we had one email for forgiving the July payment of taxes for those who could prove that they had significant impacts by COVID. We had 7 emails in support of using the fund balance. We had 11 emails that talked about a 0% or a $0 increase. We had 13 emails in support of Board of Ed. We had 4 emails that did not support using the fund balance. We had 3 emails that discussed using the tax stabilization fund. We had 6 emails that were in support of using the educational reserve fund. We had 2 emails about raising the ERF to 2%. We had 5 emails that said there should be no pay freezes or concessions. We had 1 email in support of union concessions. We had 1 email in support of Dr. Willett's plan. We had 1 email with a delay of pay increases, but wanted to be able to use back pay. So once those freezes were done, they wanted to do back pay. We had 1 email asking us to find federal, state, or state aid to assist us. We had an email about playgrounds, another topic about tennis courts, and another topic about Little League. We had 1 email asking about our sidewalk codes in respect to the Tolland Green. We had 4 emails that outlined the difficulties facing our schools, our teachers, and our students. We had 1 email outlining the challenges that residents face, the fiscal challenges that residents faced. We had 1 email about restaurants and using outdoors. We had 2 emails outlining mental health issues that are facing the town. And we had one email that was a thank you to Tolland Public Schools in their entirety. So hopefully that format was a lot easier than what I've been doing previously. Again, these were topics that one email can mention more than one of those topics. But you've all read them all, but that gives, I think, a good summary to everybody who's listening what was covered.
Thank you, Brenda. That gets me to the chairperson's report. I'm not going to get into too much right now. In essence of time, I would really like people to focus in on the meetings that we have coming up. Tomorrow is a Board of Ed meeting. On 5/19, we have that Birch Grove meeting that I think is going to be important for people to show up to. On the 21st, we're having a meeting with the Board of Ed. And this meeting is kind of going, it's doing what we did before. Like the last meeting that we didn't get to have in regards to the budget was the Board of Ed, solid waste, and
planning.
Or those were the last three areas that we didn't get a chance to meet with and discuss. So we're meeting with the Board of Ed on the 21st. At that point in time, you know, I'm assuming they're going to want to talk to us about their scenarios, our scenarios, usage of the fund, etc. That's happening on the 21st. On the 26th, we'll get the budget from Mike. On June 2nd, that's an off regular meeting. We're going to have the public hearing. That is Mike's public hearing, the town manager's public hearing on the recommended budget. On June 8th, we will then vote to decide what the budget is going to be. On June 17th, that's the annual budget presentation. I give the presentation on that one. And then on the 25th, we will actually adopt the budget and set the mill rate. It's a lot in the next month that we have to do, a lot of thrown in meetings and everything. I ask for everybody's patience and grace with the amount of things you're going to be getting in your inbox from meeting perspective in that. And that's all that's it for now. It's late. So we're going to go with that. That gets me up to 14 now for communications and petitions from council persons. If we have any, please raise your hand. Steve?
All right, Steve Jones. I'm going to try and keep it quick and concise because, yeah, we are pushing past 10 o'clock. One request I was going to look for is an update from our registrar of voters and clerks on sort of the absentee ballot process and how voting is going to go forward in August and in the ensuing months, as well as efforts for registering people to vote and just that whole process. Another item, just it wasn't in the packet or in the agenda. The normal agenda was we did have an email from a resident interested in serving on a border commission. So they're going through that process right now. So we may have a future appointment to a vacancy for a commission at a subsequent meeting. And then one other request was going to be looking into how the libraries are handling getting new individuals registered for library cards so they can access digital services, as well as renewing them, or if library renewals have been suspended so that people don't lose access for their card going inactive. And I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, I wrote those both down. I say send the email for the library question, and maybe Mike can get that for you sooner than another next meeting. The registrar of voters, I'm thinking we're going to have to probably put that somewhere on an agenda because I think it's probably a lot more complex. Anybody else have anything? No? All right, then that gets us to 15, public participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council with a 3-minute limit. If you would like to raise your hand, I will call on you in order as being raised. And if you are on a telephone and you would like to raise your hand, it is *9. Please state your name and address if you are asking a question. Liz Costa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the information tonight. I would encourage you both to support the Board of Education budget. I'd also support utilizing more of the fund balance. Last year we used 300,000. The year before we used 690,000. The year before that, I think we used just under 300,000. So it's become kind of an operating expense if you look at it that way. The ordinance allows for us to get down to 10% without having to repay it by ordinance. That wouldn't even take we have 8.1 million, that's 5.8 million that we'd have to get down to. So I would encourage you to utilize the fund balance to fully support education and the town side. I don't think anybody working for the town should have to take a pay cut during these terrible times. If there was ever a reason to utilize the fund balance, now would be the emergent situation I would think we would use it in. Finally, I think Dr. Willett and Town Manager Rosen have inordinate amount of planning to do with not a lot of information. So Dr. Willett has to plan for school going back full capacity. He has to plan for it going back partial capacity. He has to plan for it going back in distance learning. That's an entirely different situation financially as well as personnel wise. Some of the things mentioned at the state level were Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday schedules or split day schedules. That would increase the transportation budget significantly. And then finally, I would not support asking our teachers for a concession. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see anybody else raising their hand. So Steve?
Right, so if we are at item number 16, Madam Chair, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:28 p.m.
This is Brenda Felucci, I second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all in favor? Brenda?
Aye.
Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So Lisa, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night. Thanks for sticking in with us, and we'll see you soon.